are quasi-judicial in nature. This is a design review process to determine if the proposed project is congruous with the special character of the historic district or landmark. Decisions of the commission are based on the record of these proceedings, the Wilmington Design Standards for Historic Districts and Landmarks, and the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. Evidence submitted to the commission for review becomes part of the record. Appeals of commission decisions are to the Wilmington Board of Adjustment and then to the Superior Court and are based on the record appeals. On the record, appeals must be filed within 30 days of the date of the commission's action. Evidence is received during the evidentiary hearing portion of an agenda item. Those who want to address the commission are sworn as witnesses to present material and substantial evidence to the commission. The chair recognizes those who want to submit such evidence during the evidentiary hearing. Evidence should be directed to the commission. To ensure that evidence is properly recorded, please come to the podium in the hall to address the commission, state your name and address, and speak clearly. A brief reminder that members of the HPC are appointed by and serve at the pleasure of the City Council. Our charge is with respect to the protection and preservation of properties in the city's designated historic district. We are held to the standards of the Wilmington Design Standards for Historic Districts and Landmarks and per applicable North Carolina state law to determine if exterior changes are congruous with the special character of the city's historic districts. It is important that we deliberate the merits of each request in a manner that provides a record as to the basis for our decisions. Please remember that our deliberation should be centered on how a project meets the design standards and whether the proposed change is congruous or is not congruous. Commissioners, if you have received or been aware of any outside evidence related to any of the matters, please recuse yourself. At this time, I would like to request that all cell phones be either turned off or put on silence mode. Thank you. Before we begin the evidentiary part of our meeting tonight, we will have the election for an interim chairman. I'm going to open that asking for nominations, and we'll get all nominations before we vote. I would like to start by nominating Kathy Egan to be our next chairman. Anyone second that?
I'd like to second.
I'd like to make a nomination.
I was just going to ask you to do that.
Chris Gurmel.
I'll second that.
Okay, so I guess first we'll vote for Kathy. Everyone in favor of Kathy? It's 3. And then for Chris, anyone in favor of Chris? That's Chris, are you voting?
No.
So we have a tie.
Then they both fail. Both motions fail.
So we have no interim chairman?
No, we do not. That means you would run the meeting and we can address this later in the meeting or at the next scheduled meeting in August.
Okay. Okay, so we'll now open the evidentiary part of the proceedings. We will now, anyone wishing to submit evidence is asked to come to the podium in the hall now. Please state your name and address and present your evidence. But first, we need to swear in anyone who is going to be presenting evidence.
Are we not going to approve the minutes?
After we swear
That's the
everyone
next
in.
item.
If anyone who wishes to speak or even thinks they may speak this evening, either in this room or in the room across the hall for the public, if you could please stand, raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay. So before we start with the first item, we have the minutes from May 13th. Does anyone have any edits or comments to make on those? Anyone wish to give us a motion to accept those minutes?
I motion to approve.
Anyone second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item 1.
Madam Vice Chair, if I can please interject. Can we jump to item number 4, 117 South 2nd Street? Some information came to me late this afternoon. This particular property had been involved in prior litigation with our office, and I'm asking the commission to continue this matter to the August meeting so that I have more time to look into that prior litigation.
Okay. Motion for that, anyone? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And for the record, that would be August the 12th. Thank you.
Okay, item number 1.
Good evening, everyone. Is it going to? There we go. So the subject lot is currently vacant with no existing development on site. The property is located at 512 Nunn Street and is within the Historic District residential. In this district, alterations to all facades of a building and site are subject to design review, regardless of whether they can be seen from the public right-of-way. The application before you today is for the construction of a residence and detached garage with an accessory dwelling unit on a vacant lot measuring 34.6 feet wide by 132 feet deep, with 4,567 square feet. The house would be 2,023 heated square feet, while the garage would be 640 square feet. A shared driveway is proposed with 514 Nunn Street, with only 2 feet of the driveway located on the subject lot. The applicant proposes to construct a 1.5-story residence, 30 feet wide by 52 feet deep, at a height of 39 feet 4 inches. The house would have a 1-story front porch, as well as a combination screen and open rear porch. Here are the proposed side elevations of the house. The building would be rather deep, conforming to the slender shape of the existing lot and maximizing use of the property. The applicant proposes to construct a 2-story garage with an accessory dwelling unit. It would measure 20 feet wide by 32 feet deep at a height of 24 feet, 8.5 inches. The garage would have a double-door garage on the first floor and a 2nd-story porch on the front elevation. This item was continued from the May 13th meeting. The applicant originally proposed 2 parking spaces in front of the house. The revised site plan now proposes parking in the rear through a shared driveway with 514 Nunn Street. The house setback was revised from 24 feet down to 5 feet, which is consistent with the existing block. Conditions have been proposed for the commission's consideration. First is the foundation height. It is to be a maximum of 31 inches tall to conform to the maximum foundation height found on the existing block. It is currently proposed at 36 inches. Originally, the applicant also proposed to remove a pecan tree in the public right-of-way. On June 2nd, the city arborist inspected that tree and found it to be healthy. He recommends against removal. Therefore, a condition has been proposed that the tree be preserved. The design standards state that new buildings shall be designed to be compatible with nearby contributing buildings in terms of massing, scale, height, form, size, materials, proportion, fenestration, and roof form. New buildings shall be a product of its time, and there shall be a visual distinction between the old and the new, while maintaining a respect for the character of the adjacent historic buildings, the block, and the district. With that, we would like to enter the staff report into the record for tonight's proceedings.
Thank you. Any questions of staff?
I do. This garage is a new feature. I presume that garage apartments or residential areas are allowed on this, in that zoning, in that block?
Yes, sir, that's correct. I did have a preliminary review done by the zoning staff to make sure that it was in compliance with the code, and they did confirm that it was.
Anything else?
Yeah, I do. On the garage, there don't appear to be any details for the columns or anything up there. Is there anything that the applicant submitted showing architectural elements?
No, sir. It was just plain corner boards, simple square corner boards with the vertical board and batten siding.
But the columns for the second floor porch, they're indistinguishable to me in the drawing, and the ones on the house have some significant detail. So
I think they're proposing them to be a simple square column. And the applicant is here tonight, so they should be able to elaborate on that for you.
thank you.
Thank you. If the applicant would like to come forward and state your name and address and speak.
Kyle Kelsey with Source Contracting, representing Revitalize ILM at 512 Nunn Street.
Do you have anything you want to add to the report?
Not necessarily. I think last time we covered the majority of it. I think the issue was the front parking, and we have created a solution to that.
Does anybody have any questions of the applicant?
Yeah, I do. On the information provided, it says that on the front of the house that the porch area is going to be 31 inches above the grade. Is that correct?
Correct.
I think the building code requires handrails and a little railing if you're going to be more than 30 inches above grade. So I don't see any rails or anything on the house, do.
Tyler Broughton, representing Revitalize ILM, 512 Nunn Street. The goal was to, so we can do the handrails. Either way, we'll do the same exact handrails that we do on the back. We were playing around with the idea of having the fountain, because I know they were talking about the foundation being too high. So we were playing around a little bit with possibly lowering the foundation to a height that does not require handrails. We're pretty open to either way. But what if we do, if we do the same foundation that is shown, the 31 inches that they're proposing, we would just do the exact same handrails that are on the back porch.
And this would be the back porch railing?
Yes, sir. The bottom left.
Okay, it's very difficult for me to see that drawing. Do you have a detail of that?
Yes, sir. We do. It was on the original packet, Ivy. I'm not sure. We had a breakdown. I'm not sure if it's in there in the slideshow or not, but.
That's correct. If it was in the original packet, it should still be as part of one of the attachments in the packet itself.
Yeah, we had a breakdown, like a blown up drawing of exactly what the handrails were looking like. Just standard 2x2 pickets, 3 inches on center.
Ron, would you like, this is.
I think I have it over here. It's from the last one, so thank you. Thank you. Didn't make you have to walk. Thank you. So what I'm seeing from this detail, you're proposing just a metal picket, I guess, and a rail on top of it is?
Well, that would be for the stairs. The metal that you're seeing would just be for the stairs.
So then what would you propose for the rail to go around the porch if it's 31 inches?
It would be the wood. So it would be a cast iron rail on the steps going to the those PVC columns there. And then there would be wooden handrails from column to column and then up in the column to the house.
So like a 2x4 with 2x2 pickets, or
Yep.
because I don't see it in the packet that there's a description of that, what that handrail is, the horizontal on the.
Yes,
level
sir.
part.
Yes, sir. That's right. 2x2 pickets, 3 inches on center, 2x4 top rail. Yep. Is the page you have, sir? Does that show the pickets on there? The spindles?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, that's right. That's the right one.
But see, on this detail, you're showing a 4x4 wood post
Well,
going
that-
down the stairs, and this one you're showing, a metal rail and.
Right, so the first one you spoke of, that one is actually for the back porch. I was just referencing that photo to show you the spindle details on the front.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. Now we'll open up this to the public evidentiary hearing. Does anyone wish to make any other statement? No, so we'll now deliberate. Does anyone have anything to say? Commission?
I appreciate getting the parking out of the front. That works. I guess it's a zoning question or New Hanover County Tax Office. I mean, I don't know what happens when one property gets sold and if someone for some reason in the future doesn't have access to that shared driveway for whatever reason, I don't know how they go about legally taking care of that, but I think that's outside of our purview anyways.
I would imagine they would do an easement.
Absolutely, outside of our purview.
Yeah.
I'd just like to note, I did put the applicant in touch with the city engineering office and had them fill out a right-of-way request for the driveway and the shared access.
So this would all be subject to that approval.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, thank you for doing that too, Ivy. That's.
Does anyone want to do a motion?
Am I able to say something else?
Yes.
I also forgot to mention the tree, the pecan tree. I guess one of the problems, and I'm open to suggestions of any solution that you guys may have, but the tree is in an area that would prohibit the driveway from being where it's at on the plans. We'd be open to transplanting the tree or planting another tree somewhere else on the property. I don't know if.
Well, I think that was one of the staff's conditions that the tree
You're
stay.
gonna take down the pecan tree?
Yeah, that's what we were discussing. Yes, ma'am.
I doubt if you can move a tree that long.
I don't like taking down trees.
To take the picture so that you can see where the posts were delineating the property lines. And it looks like the other one is right there, so you can just faintly, ever so faintly see it. And so if the shared access driveway was over here, I just wasn't sure that it would impact the tree.
Which side of the tree? I mean, there's a curb cut right there on the right-hand side. Where's the proposed drive based on that photograph?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Wilson, will you repeat your question?
Yes, I'm sorry. There appears to be a curb cut already existing right there for a drive. Where would the new proposed driveway
The
be?
new proposed driveway would go on the left side. 514 Nunn Street is on the left of this property.
This is 512.
Yeah, that
This is 514.
No, she had it right. That's that lot line.
This is 512.
Yes.
Gosh. Apologies.
So the driveway is going to be all on 514 but shared?
It's going to be 12 feet wide. 10 feet of it will be on 514, and then 2 feet will be on 512. And yes, it would be a shared access driveway. So you can just ever so faintly see it on the left side. You see that stake with the pink ribbon there. So that's where the property line would start for 514. So I don't think that there would be any impact to the tree in this particular scenario.
Okay,
So
that's okay.
I'll just show you guys. So the only thing to note here is that the driveway curb, it would start somewhere in this neighborhood and kind of curve in like this. So it would just be really, really tight. I think we could make it work if it's not allowed. but the skirt of the driveway would be right here, right up next to that tree.
Well, I think if you do that, you might probably kill the tree and the root system. I mean, is there, do you have a drawing that shows how far off of there you're going to be?
Can you take to the site plan?
No, the survey, the site plan. Yeah, this is the one. So if you see, the tree lands about right here. And I do understand your point as well. That's kind of was not a great concern of mine, but that definitely was a thought. It would be right in this neighborhood right here. So it would be very, very tight. I think we could make it work regardless. It's obviously preferred to either plant a new tree, and we would definitely have to trim the tree up at least a little bit because it's somewhat of an eyesore. If you can see the pictures, doesn't look that great. But we could also, if we did take that tree out, we could plant another one in the public right of way, maybe just a little bit slide it over slightly so it'd still be in the public right of way. It's not a, great looking tree.
I guess I'm a little confused. When Ivy was up at the screen pointing, I presume that was the left, would be the boundary of where the access would start, right there.
Yes, sir.
You're saying is that the center of the driveway? Is
So
it the
this
right,
tree-
left side, right side?
Yes, sir. So this tree is almost smack in the middle of the property line. So, I mean,
Well, I hear you saying the property line, but the easement that's going to go through and be shared. You're saying it's going to start within 2 feet of the tree and go over?
I would say 2 to 4 feet, somewhere in that neighborhood. It'd be very close. Yeah, it's a tough one. We would at least have to trim it and trim it up at least a little bit.
It's a shared driveway.
Have you talked to an arborist about this tree?
No, ma'am. I believe Miss Ivy, you said an arborist had come out to look at it. I believe the city arborist.
There are very few pecan trees that are, that we need to preserve.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and we're all for it.
It's
Yep.
very important. You just don't plant another tree.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think that we need to have an arborist come over and look at this and, before, it's a beautiful tree.
Yes, ma'am. I agree. Yep. I want, cleaning it up a little bit. I think it would, be awesome.
And you just don't clean it up.
Right. I mean, I guess,
You have to have somebody who knows what they're doing.
yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Actually, a lot of the problem in this tree is all that ivy. It's swamped with heterohelix. And if that was cleaned off the tree, that tree would do a lot better right there.
I know,
And
yeah.
that's.
Yeah, there's just a lack of
It's a
maintenance
city
over
tree, so
time.
the city should do it.
Is it on the city property?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
it is.
it's in the right of way. Yes,
City
ma'am.
tree.
Well, if it's a city tree, the city needs to take care of it. And I think, we need to love our trees. Yeah. So it's a city tree.
Ivy, did you say that you had the arborist out there or not?
I did have the arborist out there. He went there on June 2nd, but strictly to look at the health of the tree. He didn't look at it within the context of the new driveway that was proposed.
Right, but he looked at it in context of it is a living tree. It can be revived if that is removed. Is that correct?
That's correct. He asserted that it was a healthy
Okay.
tree
All right.
and there
Thank
was no need for their removal.
All right, thank you.
And just one quick note that you are correct, it's on city property within the public right of way. So the commission could vote to preserve or remove it, but ultimately it would need a permit from the tree division of the Parks and Recreation Office.
Melissa, I know it's not our purview, but isn't it odd to have a driveway that's shared that's 10 feet on one lot and 2 feet on another? And easement purposes, do you know any background on whether that would make it more difficult to obtain?
I don't know any background on that, but I would think as long as we have a valid or as long as they have a valid easement, it would be irrelevant how much is on
Okay.
which property.
Well, we could postpone approval until we get an arborist to look at what the plan is as to whether it would hurt the tree or not.
I second that. Yeah, we need
Because we
more
wouldn't know.
information. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess in reference to that comment, if the issue is the tree staying or not staying, I don't think that persuades the issue of is it okay to build or not build the house. The driveway can be shifted as need be. So I guess I would just ask that maybe you make that we would approve it, but then make that a condition to preserve or not preserve it based on the arborist's suggestion.
You could also separate the issues for vote. And I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at, but they could go ahead and vote on, or you all could go ahead and vote on the design of the house itself and continue just the issue of the tree until next meeting so that we can get more information from the arborist. That is within your purview.
That is my question.
Well, personally, I would, I'd like to see a site plan drawn accurately indicating the radius around that tree. And again, there is some issue with root damage. If you come in there and put a concrete driveway and curving in there, that could possibly damage it. And in a year, the tree is dead. And so I just think we need to personally be a little cautious with this approval until we get the arborist or a better site plan. I mean, I couldn't tell from your site plan drawing where the curb cut is, where the tree is, and I would like to see something more substantiated as far as the drawing so that we have something for the public record to indicate what we did on this. So,
Ron, a question, does it seem appropriate though that they could seek approval or we could approve a primary home in the garage and deal with just the tree at a later time? Which, I mean, you could apply for a building permit then,
Correct.
but you can't get the building permit approved until city zoning signs off, and city zoning would be this issue. So, I mean, you'd be able to apply for the building permit, but it wouldn't get past the city. It'd still be a holdup anyways, but at least you'd have at least one thing out of the way and know that the building itself and the apartment out back, or the garage rather, is approved, if that's of any value.
I agree. You have a lot of hoops to jump over and before you get to this process. And I agree with you. And they block off the trees and, protect the trees in the city and the county. And I think that if you could, move forward with your permits, that would help, because that is a long, long process.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I mean, and this whole process in general is a long
Yeah.
process. So, I mean,
Yeah.
just the fact that we've taken the time to get to
Yeah.
this point, I think
understand.
I would appreciate the consideration that we are open to whatever the suggestion is from the tree. We wouldn't be allowed to do anything to the tree that would harm it if we had the necessary permits in general anyways. But I mean, a lot of building materials got to be ordered. A lot of things have to happen in this process outside of the tree.
Got it.
So we would appreciate that.
Well, what happens if we approve the house structure and then something comes up with the tree or with the arborist or with?
Again, in that
entrance?
that situation, we have the ability to, again, the driveway is 10 feet on one side, 2 feet on the other. If we need to shift to the left, that it only changes the plan of the driveway, not the building itself.
That's what I was going to address, saying you had some flexibility in the driveway. I thought that the site plan and the dimensions of the houses, right and left, kind of defined that driveway. And to say you have flexibility, you're not saying you're shifting the house over to move the driveway over.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of things you can do with the driveway as far as curving, as far as the angles of it. I mean, we have options in that arena. I guess I would just say not disturbing the tree by building the property, we're completely open to that. Again, it doesn't necessarily change the structure of what's being built there on the property.
The driveway, isn't this pervious concrete?
Sir?
The driveway, is it pervious concrete or impervious?
Yes, sir.
It is
Pervious. Yes,
So
sir.
that would help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more deliberation here? Anyone want to do a motion? Separating out the construction from the driveway, waiting for opinion on the tree? So read a motion.
Debating anymore.
Does anyone want to do a motion?
I'll take a shot at it here.
Okay.
Okay. I move to approve with conditions the request to construct a residence and accessory building on the vacant lot at 512 Nunn Street. Details as shown in the drawings, plans, photographs, submittals, and narrative statement contained in the application and the supplemental materials. The statements made at this meeting are a part of this request unless otherwise noted. The motion is based upon the evidence presented before us, the application submittals, testimony, staff reports, including the findings of fact. The following conditions shall be applied to ensure compliance with the design standards, those set forth in the staff report 1 through 11. The pecan tree will remain until a further decision. Am I saying that correctly? And there will be a rail on the front porch to match the back porch if it is 31 inches of height to meet code.
I would just add that we're going to wait for, an arborist is going to be involved to weigh in on the project
Okay.
to have a more developed driveway plan that the arborist can then determine if the tree will be affected.
Okay, what you said. Yeah, there'd be more developed driveway plan and the arborist weighs in, et cetera.
And can we specify that it must be a certified arborist?
Certified arborist. Okay, true.
Does it need to be with the city? I mean,
I don't know that the city arborist would have much input. He could definitely determine whether or not the proposed driveway extents could impact the root system of the tree, which would then therefore impact the health of the tree. So we could certainly ask him that. We would, again, though, need a more detailed site plan to show where the driveway, what this, the flare outs
The
are
cut, the
called,
access, yeah.
the flare outs of the curb cut would extend to. So then he could make a better determination on the effect it could have to the tree root system.
Okay, continuing on. The proposed request with conditions does comply with the Wilmington design standards for the historic district and landmarks and is compatible with the materials, features, design, context, and character of the historic district in which it is located and is congruous with the site, streetscape, and historic aspects of the historic residential as a whole. Applicable design standards, 1.6 Secretary of the Interior Standards, Standards 9 and 10, 2.1 Landscaping Standards 1 and 4, 2.2 Public Right-of-Way Standard 2, 2.3 Fences and Walls Standard 3 to 5 and 9, Standard 2.4, walkways, driveways, and off-street parking, standards 4 to 8. 3.9, utilities and energy retrofit, standard 7. 4.2, new construction infill, standards 1 through 7.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item number 2.
The Hinton House was built circa 1913 and is a contributing resource to the historic district. The property is located at 1812 Princess Street and is within the Carolina Heights Winoka Terrace Historic District overlay. In this district, only that which can be seen from the public right-of-way, excluding alleys, is subject to design review. The application before you today is for the installation of a fence around the perimeter of the property. 2 styles of fencing are proposed depending on its location in the front or rear of the lot. The applicant proposes to install a 4-foot-tall black aluminum fence with 2 square-inch pickets in the front yard. 1 5-foot-wide single gate would be at the front path entrance, and 1 7-foot-wide double gate would go along the North 19th Street side. The fence would be installed on top of the sloped area along the perimeter of the property before it begins to slope downward. The applicant proposes to install a 6-foot-tall board-on-board wood fence in the rear yard. A single gate with an arched top is proposed towards the rear of the house, perpendicular to North 19th Street. A portion of the fence would go along the rear southwest corner of the lot, but because it is not visible from the public right-of-way, it is not subject to design review. And just for your reference, the red line is where the wood fence would go, and the blue line is where the 4-foot-tall aluminum fence would go in the front yard. The design standards note that fences and garden walls have traditionally been used to delineate property lines and mark boundaries between public and private property. Fences of wood, brick, masonry, and wrought or cast iron are found within the local districts. The design standards state that new fences shall be constructed at a height no greater than 4 feet in front yards to the front corner of the house and 6 feet in the rear yard from the back corner of the house. The side yard may contain a fence between 4 and 6 feet tall. With that, we would like to enter the staff report into the record for tonight's proceedings.
Thank you, Ivy. Any questions for staff?
Is there drawing from the side? Unfortunately, that fell out of my packet. I don't have the whole, but this picture
Which
is
one?
Very hard to tell. Is there a side view of the property and showing where the fence will tie in?
There is a picture of the property in the packet.
I think it's on page 19.
And it's a view from 19th Street.
And will it come in at the rear corner or the side of the house? Where is it tying in to the, because that drawing's, I mean, the location of the house kind of covered in all the tree foliage.
Yeah, it's probably about 3/4 way back to the side of the house here along 19th Street. So this is where the aluminum fence would go. And then right here, this red line is where the wood fence would go. So it, probably, if I were guesstimating, maybe 10 feet up from the rear corner of the garage in the rear yard.
And then you've got the front part too. That you have the front.
Yeah, so there.
You've got the front yard. It's in the front yard.
Yes, the aluminum fence would go just in the front yard, up at the top of the slope. And then this is the portion of the 6-foot fence that's visible from the public right-of-way.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Would the applicant like to come up? Please state your name and address.
Jackson Altra, 1812 Princess Street. So the only thing I'll add is actually the wood fence will come to the rear of the house. It is put in place to actually, it'll come just to the rear corner. So that drawing's from our contractor where he put it. It actually, there's a long eave that comes off the rear of the house and it's projected. So it actually will tie into the direct corner of the house. And the reason we're doing that is to protect the the side entrance to the garage. So it's only going to be 6 foot from the rear of the house back. The 4-foot aluminum fence will go from the rear of the house forward.
Why are you putting a fence in the front of the house?
So we're expecting our first child as well as have a dog, and we are a block from Market Street. So we are looking to protect both our child and our dog.
And is that going to be I see the fall off from the lot to the sidewalk. It's going to be up at the top.
Yeah, so it'll be where the lot starts to fall off to the retaining wall. And the challenge we have is there are 3 different heights of the retaining wall around the property. So it would not look uniform if we were to put it at the base of the retaining wall.
I'll say my piece. We'll give you a chance. Okay.
Do you have anything to add to the report or?
One thing we'll add is the privacy fence is put in place due to a public alleyway on the back, along with the fact that we've had some challenges with people walking through as well as sleeping on the corner lot because of the church parking lot. So there's a security piece to that rear fence as well.
Okay. Any objections to any staff recommendations at all? Or you're okay with what's been proposed?
No, you got it.
Oh, I think I just wanted to add that we understand it's kind of a special circumstance to have it go further up on the left-hand side of the house, which it would tie in almost about 3/4 up our lot. But we didn't know if there's any special considerations you might be able to make for a property abutting a commercial or institutional property, like a public-facing property. But thank you.
And that you can't see from the right of way, is that correct?
Yes.
So then we don't have any say on that anyway.
Yeah, I just.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Any other public evidentiary hearing people? Nobody? Deliberations? Ashley?
I have a problem with this. This street is.
Will you make sure you're speaking into your mic? That's me.
This street in Carolina Heights is, what you do in your backyard, fences, fine. It's a front porch community. It's this Princess Street from 19th to 17th does not, we do not have front fences. Back, fine. Front is not, there are some are little grays and they have dogs and some of the little grays have been there forever, which is fine. And I just don't want my dogs down there. But it's a front porch community. It takes away from the community having this fence in the front. And you can, it's not congruous with the street. If you can find something congruous with the street, yeah, but it's not. And it's not our neighborhood. And there is a period, some little grays, and then there's part of on Chestnut between 16th and 15th, one rail has been in the sidewalk for a couple of years since Florence, and it just doesn't represent our neighborhood and what we are in our neighborhood, which is close off the back, keep the front open.
Are there any fences in the neighborhood, or is it of wood or metal, or just none?
I think we're looking at the district regardless, the entire district. It's not necessarily a neighborhood thing. And I think as far as fences go in the front of a house like this, it's the massing of this aluminum is secure, yet it's not, I wouldn't say hardly visible, but it's hardly visible. I mean, it's just a very thin, small thing that does provide that protection they want. And if you think about the district as a whole, I think you can find instances of this throughout, and this doesn't seem incongruous to me personally.
Where do you find this? Where can you show this?
There's
Other areas,
actually a little
on
dog
4th
named
Street, on 3rd Street,
Chesterfield.
I've seen these things other places around.
But that's not the same district.
There's a dog on Princess Street who lives on the corner of, I say 20th and Princess, right next to the cemetery. It's a family. They have a dog named Chesterfield. They have a fence in their front yard.
And I
Happy
think
to
there's
send
one
you
actually
pictures.
right along Market Street, right on the corner.
There's one on Market Street, there's one on
19th,
Chestnut.
19th or something.
19th and
Chestnut and
Princess.
19th.
That goes around the front as well, and maybe mid-block. I've seen examples, and you certainly see examples of fences that are picket. If the issue is metal versus wooden pickets, but I think picket fences or a metal fence, I find it to be compatible.
And there are low boundary walls in the front of these homes in this area too, a masonry low boundary wall. So I personally don't have any objection to this myself.
I have a question for staff. Have we related to the location of fences to the right of that picture where they're picking it up? It seems to be at the rear corner, but on the other side, it looks like it's going to strike right in the middle of the side of the house. Have we addressed any of the resolution about where fences can be located? I know there was some work that was going to be done on that.
Well, in this particular instance, the location of that portion of the fence in the southwest corner of the lot, it's not visible from the public right of way, so we don't have purview over that particular section on this property. But in general, it's 4 feet. Its allowable height is 4 feet from the front corner of the house. It's 6 feet from the rear corner of the house back. And the interpretation was made that given the boundaries set by the 4 feet in the front yard and the 6 feet in the backyard, the side yard would be permitted to have a range of anywhere from 4 to 6 feet in height.
As it moves back further. And that's the new standard?
That was the interpretation based on the language in the design standard, since it's not stipulated, and there are bound, again, stipulations for the front yard and the rear yard. It was determined that anything between those two heights would be permissible.
And this does start at the back corner. It looks like it turns from 4 feet up to 6 feet, right at the back corner of the house on the east side there.
Yeah, I understand that on the right-hand side. I think that is compatible. It was the left-hand property line that I was questioning and trying to get clarity on based on what the standard was.
Anything else? Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to approve with conditions the request to install a fence around the perimeter of the property at 1812 Princess Street. Details as shown on the drawings, plans, photographs, submittals, and narrative statement contained in the application and supplemental materials, and statements made at this meeting are part of the request unless otherwise noted. The motion is based on the evidence presented before us, the application submittals, testimony, staff report, including the findings of fact. The following conditions shall be applied to ensure compliance with the design standards, those set forth in the staff report 1 through 3. The proposed request with conditions complies with the Wilmington design standards for historic districts and landmarks, and it is compatible with the materials, features, designs, context, and character of the historic building and historic district in which it is located, and is congruous with the site, streetscape, and historic aspects of the Carolina Heights, Winoka Terrace Historic District overlay as a whole. Applicable design standards are 1.6 Secretary of the Interior Standards, Standard 2, and 2.3 Fences and Walls Standards 3 through 6 and 9.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 3.
The subject property was built in 2018 and is non-contributing due to its age. The property is located at 612 Gray Street and is within the Historic District residential. In this district, alterations to all facades of a building and site are subject to design review regardless of whether they can be seen from the public right-of-way. The application before you today is for the construction of a pergola and a pool in the rear yard of the property. The applicant proposes to construct a custom-built wood pergola in the rear yard measuring 10 feet wide by 14 feet long and 9 feet tall. Columns would be 6 by 6 treated lumber. It would have an open slatted flat roof, and the pergola would sit on a 10-foot wide by 14-foot long concrete pad. It would have a natural finish. The applicant proposes to construct a rectangular fiberglass pool measuring 10 feet wide by 16 feet long. It would be surrounded by a 3-foot wide concrete apron. The pool mechanical equipment would go in one of 2 locations under the rear porch, already screened by vegetation. The design standards state that swimming pools are appropriate only in the rear yard. The design standards state that gazebos and the like are not appropriate in front or side yards, only in rear yards. It says that the style of a new accessory structure may reflect the character of the main building or have a historically compatible utilitarian appearance. With that, we would like to enter the staff report into the record for tonight's proceedings.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Ivy, it meets all of the setback requirements and everything, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and what's the height of that structure?
The pergola would be 9 feet tall.
Do you know if that's to the top of the roof?
I think that's the overall height. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Ivy. Would the applicant like to step forward? Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Georgia Savis. I'm old and I'd like a pool.
And your address?
612 Gray Street.
Do you have anything to add to staff's report or recommendations or?
I don't think so. I mean, I chose a very tiny pool. We have a pretty big backyard for downtown. And I think it kind of speaks for itself. I hope it does.
Okay. Any questions?
And the pergola design is just as you pictured it, or it's shown here. It's not going to be latticed in on one side
No.
for privacy, or
And
it's
it
just gonna
won't
be
have,
open on
it
four
won't have the
sides.
tails or anything. Pretty basic.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
might put a condition in that we come to use it.
I don't know.
Is there anyone from the public who wants to present any evidence? Would you please step up to the microphone? Did you swear, were you sworn in?
Yes.
Okay. Please state your name and address.
Is this for my personal address or the job that I'm here for?
Personal.
Okay. Dustin May, 159 Rogers Avenue. Just had a question about the tails. That seems pretty modern for downtown, and it seems like tails would actually make that more aesthetically appealing for downtown, because generally that kind of Italianate, Greco-Roman kind of design has these tails. So I was just curious if that was something that like matters. Yeah.
Hi again. If you look at my house, everything, including the molding, which is a real pain to clean, is right angles. Everything is incredibly plain. It's got a craftsman vibe to it and a little bit of an industrial vibe. And I didn't want the tails because it makes it have a little bit more of a fancy look. And everything is super, super plain, which is why I'm going with a plain rectangle and not a curvy pool. Thank you.
Oh, excuse me.
Sure.
Just from a staff standpoint, can you confirm that you're proposing to revise the design of this pergola to not include the tails, the 1 foot
Oh, no.
overhangs?
No, there aren't overhangs. You know how mostly the pergolas have those little tails? This is going to have a band. You can see it better in that other picture,
Oh,
Ivy.
Oh, okay, I apologize.
There's a
I
ba-
think they're
that's
referring
okay.
to exposed rafter tails.
Yeah, no, there's a
but this will
band
be
kind of keeping it
banded.
cleaner.
Thank you for that.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Open up the deliberations. Does anybody have anything to say? I think it looks great. If there's nothing, then anyone want to do a motion?
I make a motion that we approve it.
Then you have to read the motion.
I will, but what, doesn't someone have to second that?
No,
No, okay. I move to approve with conditions the request to construct a pergola and a pool in the rear yard at 612 Gray Street. Detail is shown on the drawing, plans, photographs, submittals, and narrative statements contained in the application, and supplemental materials and statements made at this meeting are part of this request unless otherwise noted. This motion is based on the evidence presented before us, the application submittals, testimony, staff report, including the findings of fact. The following conditions shall be applied to ensure compliance with the design standards, those set forth in the staff report 1 through 2. The proposed request with conditions does comply with the Wilmington design standards for historic district and landmarks and is compatible with the materials, features, design, context, and character of the historic district in which it is located, and is congruous with the site, streetscape, and historic aspects of the historic district residential as a whole. Applicable design standards: 2.5 garages, carriage houses, and accessory structures, standards 4 through 6. 2.6 decks and swimming pools, standard number 8.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Item number 5. After that, we can take a break for a minute.
The Sprunt House. It was built in 1912 and is a contributing resource to the historic district. The property is located at 411 South Front Street and is within the historic district residential. In this district, alterations to all facades of a building and site are subject to design review, regardless of whether they can be seen from the public right-of-way. The application before you today is for the construction of a pergola and for landscaping in the rear yard of the property. The applicant proposes to construct a custom wood pergola in the rear yard measuring 21 feet wide by 25 feet long by approximately 12 feet tall. The roof would be GAF timberline shingles. Columns would be 10 inches wide, wrapped in smooth cedar. Wood diagonal knee braces are proposed. The color would be off-white to match the existing posts on the rear of the house. A sub panel would be installed in the existing screened area along the fence line as shown in the photo in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. The applicant proposes to relocate several existing bushes along the fence on the north property line. In their place, the applicant is proposing to plant 5 palm trees, each approximately 12 feet tall. I would like to note that in 2014, a COA was approved for a pergola and 2 cabbage palms. Out of the list of approved work items, it seems the pergola project never came to fruition. The design standards state that gazebos and the like are not appropriate in front or side yards, only in rear yards. The style of a new accessory structure may reflect the character of the main building or have a historically compatible utilitarian appearance. With that, we would like to enter the staff report into the record for tonight's proceedings.
Thank you, Ivy. Any questions for staff?
Do you have another view of the pergola rather than a section that would show what it really looks like?
Oh, I apologize.
I
Not
don't see any
for the-
detailing on there that matches anything on the house. I mean, the pergola looks so different from any detail on the house that maybe I'm missing something here, but is that the only picture that you have of the pergola?
For the PowerPoint, yes, sir. But in the packet, there are a couple of other views that the applicant did submit in their drawings.
I personally like palm trees myself, but did I see something at one point in the guidelines that palm trees is not one of the accepted species? Or I don't know what kind of palm this is. I mean, there's so many, but I'm just
So-
curious. I mean, I would be fine with approving it, but I just didn't know if that was one of the recommended
Absolutely.
plantings.
So it is not listed in the suggested planting list. So in Appendix C, there's the suggested planting list. It's not all inclusive. It is just a list of suggested plantings that were compiled. I did double check to make sure that it's not listed on the invasive or non-native species list for the state of North Carolina, and it's not on any of those either.
Yeah, it's not on the opposed list either.
However, I'm looking at the photographs submitted in the package, and I mean, there's nothing in the landscaping, the figurines, the statuary, the existing trees that even resemble a palm tree are compatible with that. I mean, I'm looking at this really pretty rear yard with some really, really nice architectural features, some nice landscaping, and it just seems to me that the palms may be out of place in that particular environment, but
The only thing I
it's just my
can,
thought, yeah.
I don't agree.
the only
think
thing I
they're
can
beautiful
mention
by a pool.
is that in 2014, a COA was approved that included 2 cabbage palm trees. And I do believe ultimately 1 was planted in the front yard.
And
I think they were approved for 2, but I think only 1 got planted.
I personally think they're gorgeous by a pool. So,
Any other
This is
questions?
Linda Lavin's house, right?
yes.
Okay, that house is gorgeous, yeah, okay, yeah.
Thank you, Ivy. Does the applicant wish to present?
My name is Dustin May. I'm Vice President of Seaside Services, representing the Masons at 411 South Front Street. This pavilion, we have submitted engineered drawings, and I understand they are not exactly the easiest to read or show the description. On top of that, in our proposal, I wrote that these original plans that kind of show a detailed Greek style post are actually not going to be used. We're going to be using 10 by 10s that are going to be wrapped in cedar, not wrapped, but trimmed out on each corner with cedar, smooth cedar. It's going to basically exactly match the post that they have for the railing on their back deck. The hip style roof is exactly the same style roof as the home. The building will be on top of an existing patio, so there wouldn't be any like more impervious surface added to this. And the palm trees, The main reason that the Masons would like to have those is because they have a horrible eyesore next door. And the only trees that they think in a pool facade that would make sense to kind of bush out above the fence line to kind of block that view would be a palm tree. And I think that they had, as Ivy said, gotten a pavilion approved a few years ago. And I'm not sure if there were palm trees in that application or not, but I think that they had said that they submitted them at least.
This cutaway is the only view we have of this. Could you use the pointer and kind of walk us through with the light point and show us what you're describing about the board and how it's going to appear from
Yes.
when you look at it?
Right here, these posts right here, these were originally going to be 10 by 10s inside with a PVC encasing that kind of resembles like a Greek column. But after more talked with the customer, and the reason we were originally going with that is because they have actual columns that just kind of stand up in their backyard that string lights from one to the other. But it made more sense to make it match. And you can hardly see up here because I think their deck is still under construction, but they had posts lining this perimeter of this back deck that were, it's also samples provided in the packet, but they're square and they have 1x2s, 45 on all the corners to kind of create a stylized post. So we would be mimicking that design. And then as you see, we have the knee bracing going through here. The entire pavilion would be trimmed out with smooth cedar and painted to match the rear of the home as well. We would basically, the corner posts would sit on each corner of this existing pad. And we would have to cut out a little bit of the pad and actually pour footers off the pad just slightly. They would be 4 foot in diameter by 3.5 feet deep to make to meet the hurricane zone coating to counteract the uplift. Yeah, I'd say, I mean, unless you have any other questions, that's probably.
Yeah, the support braces that you're showing, again, I'm an architect and it's kind of difficult for me to understand the structure without seeing more of a drawing, like an elevation of some sort. But the bracing that you're proposing up there, is there anything similar to that on the house or anything similar to that detail anywhere on the property?
The property does not have any knee bracing because this home, the back porch, the deck is actually built on top of the back dining room, kitchen area. So it's actually built into the home. Otherwise, if they had a deck, generally it would have knee bracing. That is required by the engineer. The style of them is completely flexible. We can do them with the curve. We can also do them just straight. But that is to prevent any kind of lateral racking from hurricane winds. And as well as it will definitely add aesthetic appeal to this building.
Well, my only question is that it just seems like things should be compatible, and I'm not sure from that building section that you show there, which is extremely detailed, and it doesn't seem to me that and this is my opinion only, I'm sure other people will have opinions, but it doesn't seem compatible with the really beautiful building that is there. It's a beautiful building. The yards, I've been there in the past. The home, it was beautifully maintained, and it just seems out of kilter to me. But
may I ask?
Some of the ladies will have a different opinion, but
may I ask if that's just due to that bracing that you see, or?
I mean, it seems like part of what you would want to do would try to make it fit in with the house and not make it look so totally different. And I'm not sure this will, but it's difficult to tell from that drawing. And typically on the application package, I thought we had something in there that we have to show elevations of the building or something. But
Oh,
I could be
there,
incorrect. And I've gone through the whole package here and I can't seem to.
because those drawings should have all the elevations in them. They were
Yeah.
from my engineer.
Well, I've looked through them and there are no really elevations that show that, but that's not your fault. I'm just asking that, in my opinion, it looks like it's not as compatible as it could be.
Okay.
But thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'll just say that we made the roof. It's going to be symmetrical to the roof on the house. It's going to be a hip style roof. It is going to be made with top-notch materials. They want to build a beautiful pavilion, and it is going to be not only color matched to the home, but the posts going up are going to be identical to the posts that are holding the railing on the back deck, as well as the knee bracing aspect of it. Like I said, the home does not have any decks where they need knee bracing, but those are things where we can get a multitude of styles and designs as far as those lateral braces go, that would be able to tie it into the home. Honestly, that was kind of more of an afterthought. I did not think that would be something to hang this up on, but
well, you could probably, that structure could be designed without those bracings there. They seem to be more visual than anything else. So
the only way that we would be able to design this structure in a hurricane zone without those braces is to use steel reinforcements. And our customer, and I'm assuming no one here would want them to use big steel I-beams to connect these posts to prevent that racking instead of some stylized knee bracing. So, I did have original sketches. They actually do have a little bit more of the design, but none of these specifications. And when I brought them to the engineer, he kind of took it all over and said, hey, this is the bare minimum of what we need to do to have this thing safe, make sure the wind isn't going to knock it over or pick it up or anything like that. I mean, that's why we got to go 3.5 feet into the ground, and 4-foot wide footers, which is quite a bit of weight holding this thing down.
okay, also on that same drawing you're showing up there, the detail that with what you're wrapping the column in, and it looks like some heavy molding. It's cross-hatched on your drawing up there.
Yes.
Is that going to be the column capital on there, or
no?
What does that look like?
In the plan, I have a sample in the end provided right here. This is what the columns will look like on this picture right here. So the engineer designed that before we had changed the style of the columns. This is actually a picture of one of the columns on their back deck. So
That's the
this
second
is
to last page in the packet.
It's the last page in the packet. Yes.
I don't mind the braces at all personally. I am surprised that the girders and just the roof decking and the framing and everything doesn't provide enough resistance to the racking. But regardless, everything, I thought that the use of cedar was authentic, more authentic than treated wood. So I laud you for cedar, but then I was kind of surprised to see a vinyl ceiling, like it's protected. You could put wood up there and you're not going to have any issues with it. I'm not sure why all of a sudden you went completely the other direction with a PVC ceiling.
Okay, so the reasoning behind that, well, just from my experience being a licensed contractor, I have to go into all kinds of porches downtown and rip wood out and have to reseal it and put it back up. Since this is not going to be visible and it's going to mimic tongue and groove wood paneling, which they would have painted white regardless, this is just a more sustainable solution. And we pride ourselves on trying to find the most sustainable solutions that are also aesthetically appealing and coincide with historic specs.
But it's your contention that if you used wood and painted that you're going to be having to replace rot in the future?
Yes,
You would think?
because it is open air, yes, it has a roof on it, but as soon as a hurricane comes through here, there's going to be all kinds of water and moisture blown up into it. And for that reason, we were proposing that. Now, if it was make it or break it, we could go mahogany or something else. We're certainly not going to be messing with treated pine anymore. That stuff is just, it's trash. So we're really trying to do this as a very high-end pavilion that's going to be here for a while.
So ceilings, porch ceilings all over downtown. I mean, the only way you're going to have rot in porch ceilings anywhere protected, typical porch ceilings is if you have a roof leak from above. That's the only way. I mean,
well, I don't mean necessarily rot. I mean, any moisture that gets into these tongue and groove boards can warp them and buckle them in the porches. Yes, most of the cases is where the moisture comes from above, but there are cases where there's no roof leak and I'm still pulling down beadboard because it's buckling and they want to redo it.
but you'd be amenable to
Absolutely.
wood if that was a condition.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone else has any feelings on wood versus, I don't know if I'm standing on an island or if anyone else feels the same way.
I guess I should add that if the bracing is an issue, I could go back to my engineer and work on that as well. Those two things, I'm sure that the masons would not want to let this fall through just because of that. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public wish to speak? Have any evidentiary? Okay, open for deliberations. I have a mahogany wood on my porch ceilings and there's nothing wrong, nothing happens. It's on a porch, not wide open like that, but.
Yeah, I think if it gets a coat of paint, primer, caulk the edges and a coat of paint, semi-gloss paint, it's not shouldn't really be an issue. And as far as, it's polyvinyl chloride and, it's just a chemical and the manufacture of that, if you can avoid it, it's nice. And it feels like this could just be a pine ceiling that gets painted.
And that is allowed, PVC, even though it's not seen, because I know PVC fencing and lots of things are not allowed in siding, but this would be acceptable.
That's correct. New construction has more flexibility in terms of use of synthetic materials. There's no standard that stipulates the use of synthetics versus more traditional building materials in this respect. If it's attached or on the historic building, there is a standard that traditional materials be used. But again, with new construction and accessory buildings, there is more flexibility.
Well, I personally like the proposal, but I feel like we've collectively kind of just asked for more information or redesigned, and the project is kind of evolved right in front of us, and yet it's very hard to see and understand. That drawing that's shown has changed. The capital's not there anymore, and just I like the pavilion. I like the landscaping. I certainly understand the desire for privacy with the palms. Again, I just feel like we really don't know what we're approving, and
Could the applicant just spell those things out and we just put those as the conditions stated in the actual motion?
It's possible, but again, the drawing, it's just unfortunate that we're not seeing a rendering of the finish.
Correct?
Sorry?
Right. It's a very private backyard.
Yes, and I appreciate
We're
that.
not putting like chain link fences.
I appreciate
in front
that.
of
I think
the home.
I certainly we all live close to each other and it's a social community, but particularly with a pool, and it's a beautiful, big backyard. Um, And I understand their desire for vegetative growth that will provide some block from overlook. And I like the pergola. I just wish we knew what it was going to look like.
That drawing that's up there, it speaks to the function well and less the form. And that's a little bit of an issue as far as how the application was put together. But I would like to offer them the opportunity at least to spell some of those things out, just so we can, it doesn't seem like rocket science. This one seems, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful backyard, and all of this, if we could just hear like what those issues are, that they could be listed in the conditions and allow this to move forward, is my sense of what to do about this.
You can come forward.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Dustin May, once again. I would like to point out, as well as you kind of pointed out, this is not going to be visible from either the front or the back of the home. I mean, their home might have 6 feet between the property fence and the home on either, or 2 feet on the northern side and probably 6 feet on the southern side. And the way that the lot is angled, I've tried even looking, there's no way from either street you would be able to see what is going on. As far as the drawing, I wouldn't have picked that drawing myself to be the one up there to show. I think that all the drawings are more, they're drawn by an engineer. They're more functional than they are aesthetic. However, some of the other ones show kind of the structure a little bit better because this is a view from the side instead of a view from the front. But the sample of what the columns are going to be is provided in the packet. As far as the style goes, I mean, it's very simple, cut and dry hip roof. There's going to be 8 feet of clearance to walk under it, and that's why the peak is going to be 12 feet. It's going to be a vaulted ceiling. The knee bracing, it's pretty easy to try and get rid of that, just by looking at it. But I mean, we all know what hurricanes do around here, and any kind of lateral support you can put on a structure is going to help.
So I understand, so that second to last photograph that shows one of these little columns that are on a roof.
Yeah, they're on a roof deck so
that's what the column would look like. That's what these 4 or several columns would look like.
Yes.
Right? Just like what's on the house.
I hit the wrong button. How do I move forward? I'm sorry. Yes. So those columns that you're seeing are these that are right here, and they would be what would be used, or the same design would be used for the columns of the pavilion.
Right.
The posts would be sitting right on each corner of the pad. They would have, how there's trim on that post sample that goes up. They would also have like a piece of 1x6 wrapping the top and the bottom to tie it all in together. The reasoning behind the PVC proposition versus mahogany, because those were the 2 options we discussed, is that PVC or mahogany is extremely durable, and it's great. I see a lot of porches downtown using it. It's very expensive, and to buy a very expensive, nice wood just to paint it white when no one's going to see it was something that a customer who, understandably is conscientious of the cost of the project is going to decide to go with. Now, like I mentioned, if there's a condition that it has to be mahogany to get this passed tonight, we certainly.
No, I would think it'd just be wood, not the species are kind of irrelevant, just wood. I mean, if a customer begged me to put mahogany on a ceiling like this, I would tell them no.
Well, I will not put pine on that ceiling.
Huh.
They're going to they're going to pay for mahogany if it's not.
I mean, wood,
PVC.
that part, I don't think really matters. We're just talking about wood versus PVC.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was really just came down to when you look at the materials that are available in tongue and groove, panel board, you've got pine, which is not even treated. You've got PVC and you've got mahogany. Now I'm sure there's something else there that I'm not aware of, but these are the three options that are most common. The pine, I would never install even in someone's front porch. It attracts mold. Even if you seal it, I mean, it's not an ideal product, especially now that they grow these trees in 20 years. It's not hard to pine anymore. So basically the thing would be between mahogany or PVC. And like I said, they would be happy to do that. It was just in the beginning when we were planning this project, it didn't make sense since it was going to be painted.
It's a shame to paint mahogany
So they're
white.
planning on putting in mahogany or mahogany?
They were planning on painting their ceiling white regardless, which is where we came to the idea that since it wasn't against historic specs, we would try and get PVC passed. If PVC wasn't passed, then we would do it in mahogany because the owner does not want to take his chances with
You cannot
pine.
do pine.
Yeah.
It's not like it was. They're using downtown, the experienced contractors are using mahogany.
Yeah, and
instead of pine.
that is
And thank you
exactly.
for doing that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working with the Historic Commission actually for a few years now, and no major projects like this, but everything we've done was using mahogany, or if it had to be pine because it was siding or something like that, we were making sure it was double primed and everything like that. So we're not, yeah, we would not do that.
Yeah, sorry to ask so many questions, but the drawings don't kind of, for me, okay, I'm looking at this photograph that you provided that you say the columns are going to look like that. Okay, so these don't look anything like the application up there. So, and it's hard for us to approve something where we have no documentation of what the end result is going to be. We have a certain responsibility to require that type of information. So you've got column capitals up there and a really thick base around, and this is a very simple detail of that column. And I like the detail. It's just not shown in the drawings. That is different. Now, just another question. You said it's 12 feet tall to the top of the roof, to the peak of the roof.
Yes, sir.
The columns on the back porch, how tall are those? The ones that you're mimicking for the pergola, the one?
They're approximately 4 feet tall. The columns for the pavilion would be 8 feet tall, and they would have the last foot of it where the band is notched in to the top. Everything would look flush and.
Well, no doubt it's going to be a nice looking structure for sure. So, yeah, but thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we have the alternative of approving this the way it is or waiting to get a better rendering of what this will look like and delay this a month. And I think that's basically what we've come down to.
Is there any way that we could allow staff to work with the applicant to approve the column? We basically know what he wants to do. We just need to have some better documentation of what's going there. So perhaps Ivy could have the applicant provide a little better detail from the engineer that would show exactly what is going to be placed there, and perhaps we could approve that as a condition. Would that be something that you could do, Ivy? Or?
Yes, I think that's definitely doable. The applicant has stipulated that its attachment 7K is what they intend to build for the column. That would be the design. So I could request that, well, in the condition, there could be in the motion, there could be a condition that the columns will match that, and attachment K, and a drawing will be submitted to staff, I guess, confirming
Okay.
the style of the column.
But
that
if
make
we did
sense?
it that way and the commissioners approved it, then
Mhm.
the applicant could go ahead and move forward, right?
Make a condition for the column as well as the ceiling to be wood.
If that's the wish of the commission. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a sense from anyone else yet on that.
I think it's a shame to paint mahogany white.
So if we're going to talk about mahogany and tropical hardwoods again, I've installed, I can't count how many ceilings I've installed out of tongue and groove pine all over downtown. One was on Gray Street, a project, a thing just like this, and the girders were out of pine. Not only the girders, but the ceiling as well. And it was tongue and groove pine, and painted it, and it's beautiful. Like 15 years later, it's fine. I wouldn't use wood windows out of pine. I would use mahogany or some other tropical hardwood, but it seems like pine is more than adequate. I just don't want to get in the way of, I don't want to mandate mahogany. I just, when
So
I'm
we could
saying
just say
wood,
wood.
that's my preference is wood, that's all.
You want to do a
But
motion?
yet in the standard, the PVC is acceptable.
For new construction, that is correct, as long as it is not on or attached to the historic building itself.
Well, since this is new construction,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know if we have a standing to deny the PVC in favor of wood. That's what I'm thinking.
I would probably point to the fact that the standard says that it should be compatible with the main house or have a similar utilitarian appearance. So you just have to weigh how much that would potentially impact its compatibility.
How old is this house, Ivy? 1912.
Gonna make me do some math here. It's
So it's just-
1912, so.
So it's historical
108,
contributory.
109 years old.
Okay. You want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I move to approve with conditions, the request to construct a pergola and install landscaping in the rear yard of 411 South Front Street. Details as shown on the drawings, plans, photographs, submittals, and narrative statement contained in the application and supplemental materials and statements made at this meeting are part of this request unless otherwise noted. The motion is based on the evidence presented before us and the application submittals, testimony, staff report, including the findings of fact. The following conditions shall be applied to ensure compliance with the design standards, those set forth in staff report 1 and 2. And the columns will match those set forth in attachment 8. And drawings will be submitted to staff to confirm that the columns will be in compliance with attachment 8. And the ceiling of the pergola will be in wood. The proposed request with conditions complies with the Wilmington design standards for historic districts and landmarks. It is compatible with the materials, features, design, context, and character of the historic building and the historic district in which it is located, and is congruous with the site, streetscape, and historic aspects of the historic district residential as a whole. Applicable design standards, 1.6, Secretary of the Interior Standards, Standard 2, 2.1, Landscaping, Standard 2, 2.5, Garages, carriage houses, and accessory structures, Standards 4 through 6.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break now.
When do we go back to meetings?
Item number 6.
This is the Smith Willoughby House. It was built circa 1907, and it is a contributing resource to the historic district. Property is located at 1902 Market Street and is within the Carolina Heights Winoka Terrace Historic District overlay. In this district, only that which can be seen from the public right-of-way, excluding alleys, is subject to design review. The application before you today is for a waiver of the 365-day stay of demolition and demolition of an existing accessory building and stucco wall. Excuse me. The applicant also proposes to install a rear fence, perform landscaping, and seeks after the fact approval for a portion of a rear fence. The applicant proposes to demolish the existing accessory building and white stucco wall in the southwest portion of the property. The outbuilding was originally constructed as a garage in approximately 1920. The inventory data originally identified it as contributing, but due to the extent of alteration since then, it is likely no longer considered a contributing resource. The stucco wall is also proposed for removal A COA was issued March 14th, 1996 to construct the stucco wall and for alterations to the garage to convert it to a storage space, including the enclosure of the original garage door opening along South 19th Street. The applicant proposes to construct a one-story accessory dwelling unit using the existing foundation plus an extension of the footprint to the north. The east elevation is not visible from the public right-of-way and therefore is not subject to design review. The new ADU would be 583 square feet, measuring 22 feet wide by 26 feet 6 inches long by 18 feet 1 7/8 inch tall. It would have a similar form, roof style, and materials as the existing accessory building. I would like to note that the zoning administrator has provided preliminary approval for reduced setbacks for the building for the purpose of retaining trees on the site. The 42-inch laurel oak tree immediately to the east of the existing footprint and the 24-inch pecan tree on the north side. The applicant proposes to remove an existing 8-inch dogwood tree and two 4-inch camellia plants located on the north side within the footprint of the planned new accessory dwelling unit. The applicant is seeking approval to install fences on a portion of the property, as well as after the fact approval for a portion of fence installed around a pool in the rear yard. Outlined in green, the applicant proposes to remove a 4-foot tall wood picket fence extending from the northeast corner of the existing accessory building to the southwest corner of the house. In its place, the applicant proposes a 6-foot tall board-on-board wood fence extending out from the northeast corner of the accessory dwelling unit to the southwest corner of the house and extending from the southeast corner of the accessory dwelling unit for a small portion along the south property line. Outlined in blue, they propose to install a 4-foot tall wood picket fence to enclose the patio area on the south side of the accessory dwelling unit. Outlined in red, they seek after the fact approval for a 6-foot tall board-on-board wood fence. In September of 2020, Mr. Walton determined that the pool could not be seen from the public right-of-way and no COA was required. It was simply a mistake, and unfortunately, the fence was overlooked during the pool project and a COA was not obtained. So they are seeking after the fact approval for that portion of the fence alone. A notice of violation was issued on March 25th, 2021 for the fence. The applicant had no intention to circumvent the process and intends to do the right thing by seeking your approval tonight for that fence. The design standards state that a delay in demolition is only recommended for historically significant buildings that contribute to the overall aesthetic character of the historic district. The design standards state fences and garden walls have traditionally been used to delineate property lines and mark boundaries between public and private property. Standards state that new fences should be no greater than 4 feet in front yards to the front corner of the house and 6 feet in rear yards from the back corner of the house. The side yard may contain a fence between 4 and 6 feet tall. The design standards state that the style of a new accessory building may reflect the character of the main building or have a historically compatible utilitarian appearance. With that, I would like to enter the staff report into the record for tonight's proceedings.
Thank you, Ivy. Any questions for staff? Okay, will the applicant like to step forward? Please state your name and address. Have you been sworn in?
I have not.
If anyone else has not been sworn in yet and plans to speak this evening, please stand. Please state your name and address.
My name is Kevin Gear. I'm the general contractor on the project. So I think Ivy was pretty clear about what we're trying to do here. There is a current accessory structure out here that we tried everything we could do to make it work for the homeowner's needs. And structurally, it's inadequate. And it's got quite a bit of issues that we located. So we're proposing to demo the existing structure and then build the new accessory structure. We worked hard with city zoning to find a way to make this work so that we could save the trees. Like Ivy stated, there's a 42-inch oak tree that we're able to stay outside of its root system, as well as a pecan tree more towards the Market Street side. For the camellias and the other, I think there's 3 trees, we're planning on trying to move them, but it's difficult to get in touch with Mr. Akers right now. But if we can get in touch with him, we will move those. So, we are going to tie in the existing fence around the pool up to the structure, which is for pool safety. And then there is a fence in the front of the property that we are going to match on the back end of this property on the alley side. As you can see in our plans, everything on the exterior for siding, fascia, soffitting, etc., will all be cedar. It'll be painted to match the house. All the windows will be Geldwin sightline wood windows, and we'll be matching the shingles on the existing house.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yes, I do. In your packet, you had, it's a very interesting project, by the way. You have a packet showing the doors that you want to use on the new accessory building. Are there any things in the house that would be similar to the doors? The doors you selected are very nice, but they're almost like a prairie style of architecture. And I didn't know kind of if there was something else you discovered that made you select that particular style.
So I can't remember what the front door is.
But you show one here with a door with nice windows and 2 side lights.
Yes, it's a mahogany door
right,
that we're planning on installing.
Looks very nice. But you know, some of the features on the house are stucco, almost Art Deco-ish in a way, not really, but you know, using that material. So I was just asking, you know, about that.
I think I believe it matches with some of the windows on the property, but we're trying to obviously make this thing aesthetically pleasing as well. And I think those doors work well with it, within the whole style. Yes.
It may have been, this neighborhood was developed by, the architect was Barrett Stevens, who was one of the main predecessor to Frank Lloyd White in the prairie style. And this matches the prairie style in the Carolina Heights neighborhood.
Right.
Just, you know, it's very common.
Right.
I'm sorry, what was the comment you made about trying to hire Acres for something, Acres tree moving service?
So
but I see in the packet, it says you're just removing a dogwood and some camellias.
we're going to remove them, but if we can save them, we will.
Oh, I see.
Yes. The pecan and the oak are going to stay in place.
What is the setback from the door that we're seeing? That's the street side, is that correct?
On the left-hand side is the street side, is 19th Street.
Yeah, use the pointer and Jim.
So here's the proposed structure.
Oh, I see
And this
that,
is
but
19th
the
Street
one,
here.
the drawing we're seeing with the door,
So
that would open onto 19th Street?
there is a patio door here, and there will be a door on this side on 19th Street.
And what is that setback from the sidewalk? Is there a sidewalk there?
There's no sidewalk.
There is no sidewalk.
There's no sidewalk. I can't see that far on that screen. It should show it in all of the drawings, which I can pull up here.
I just double checked the drawings. It's 3.1 feet.
Oh,
It's
it is
proposed
from
right now,
from the curb.
from the property line.
Oh,
So there's a little bit of green space between the property line and the street, but from the property line, it would be 3.1 feet.
see.
Which is what the existing structure is now. So we're planning on staying within the footprint and moving or extending the building towards Market Street. The side and front of the property have heavy greenery. So from Market Street, you would barely even be able to notice that the structure was bigger.
The original garage is so sweet, I think. I mean, particularly looking past what's happened to it over recent years.
Right.
The drawing that we're seeing there facing the windows and even the end that would have been the opening it's such a sweet, compatible structure for the house. I feel like the new drawing or the proposed plan is just, it's so boxy and so uninteresting. It may check all the right boxes, but it doesn't have the warmth or element of that original structure to me.
I think with the cedar siding that we're going to be putting on with the
Well,
shake
maybe
and the,
that's, that certainly will soften it and connect it to the house. It's just.
so the
it
image
somehow
you're,
just, from what I'm seeing, just doesn't look in harmony with the site and the connection to the house. It really is kind of cold looking, but I'm sure it has in the elements that you wanted to incorporate in the building. But it's in contrast to the original structure, it just is somewhat cold, I think.
so the original structure from the street, the only thing that you can see is this large stucco wall and a garage opening that they enclosed with stucco and glass block.
Yeah,
So-
well, I understand. I saw what had been done to it, but you know, obviously maybe you want more space, but it's a lot of that could be removed to go back to the integrity of the original structure, which was not good.
Right.
But you know, it clearly may be that you're looking and want more space than
Right.
that small building.
Right. Our original plan was to tie into the building and extend out from it, but it's just not possible with the way the building was constructed and the issues that are within the building. And simply having to tear out half of it because of the stucco and et cetera.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who wants to present evidence from the public? So we'll open deliberations here among the commissioners. No one in the public?
I move to approve the request, excuse me, to waive the 365-day stay of demolition and to demolish the accessory building and stucco wall, construct a new accessory dwelling unit, install a fence, landscaping, and approve after the fact installation of a rear fence at 1902 Market Street. Details as shown on the drawings, plans, photographs, submittals, and narrative statement contained in application and supplemental materials and statements made at this meeting are part of the request unless otherwise noted. This motion is based on the evidence presented before us, the applicant submittals, testimony, staff report, and the findings of fact. There are no additional conditions to this. that I'm aware of. The proposed request does comply with the Wilmington Design Standards for Historic Districts and Landmarks. It is compatible with materials, features, design, context, and character of the historic building and the historic district in which it is located, and is congruous with the site, streetscape, and the historic aspects of the Carolina Heights, Winoka Terrace Historic District as a whole. Applicable design standards 1.6, Secretary of the Interior Standards 2 and 10, 2.1 landscaping standards 1 and 4, 2.3 fences and walls standards 3, 4, 6, and 9, 2.5 garages, carriage houses, and accessory buildings standards 4 through 6, and 6.2 demolition standards 1 through 3, 7, and 8.
Anyone want a second?
Second.
Oh, if I may interject real quick, Mr. Wilson?
Yes. Did I miss something?
Just if you'll note the standards set forth in the staff report 1 through 6.
Oh,
or to
yes,
whatever
I'm
you
sorry.
want.
Thank you. That's a friendly amendment. Yeah, thank you.
Ash, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 7.
All right, so the subject lot is currently vacant with no existing development on site. The property is located at 514 Nunn Street, and it is within the Historic District Residential. In this district, alterations to all facades of the building and site are subject to design review, regardless of whether they can be seen from the public right of way. As you will recall, on May 13th, the HPC approved a COA for new construction on this lot for a 2-story residence and a rear detached 2-story garage. The application before you today is for a modification to that approved COA, specifically for the driveway and the setbacks for the rear detached garage. On the left is the site plan submitted with the application heard by the HPC at the May 13th meeting. On the right is the updated site plan. The applicant proposes to modify the approved driveway to create a shared access drive with its neighbor at 512 Nunn Street. If you recall, 512 Nunn Street had no access for parking included with the application. The applicant owns both 512 and 514 Nunn Street, and to provide parking for both lots, they propose the shared driveway. The modified driveway would be 12 feet wide. 10 feet of it would be on 514 Nunn Street, and 2 feet would be on its adjacent neighbor at 512 Nunn Street. The applicant is also requesting approval to change the approved gravel driveway to concrete. Secondly, the drawings approved by the HPC at the May 13th meeting for the detached garage had the correct building dimensions, but the site plan did not. The site plan was updated to reflect the correct building dimensions approved by the HPC. The applicant seeks approval for the revised garage setbacks consisting of 5.4 feet on the west side, 5 feet on the east side, and 5 feet from the rear. Originally, it was 2 feet on both the east and west side, and then 10 feet from the rear. So they're proposing to reduce that rear one back down to 5 feet. The design standards state that driveways in the residential areas of the historic district tend to be narrow based on the width of early cars and often lead to a rear parking area, garage, or carriage house. The standards state that in the past, driveways were finished with compacted earth, gravel, and oyster shells. Staff did include some precedent in the report to show that concrete driveways have been approved for new construction previously in the historic district. And so with that, we'd like to enter the staff report into the record for tonight's proceedings.
Thank you, Ivy. Does anyone have any questions for staff? Thank you. Does the applicant wish to present?
Kyle with Source Contracting, representing Revitalize ILM with 514 Nunn Street. I think Ivy covered it pretty well. Again, this is a continuance of what we spoke about in the last meeting. Just creating a solution for the off-street parking.
So I have a question, Melissa. This is pretty much the same condition that we had for the other in terms of the tree and the driveway. Is there anything else that we need to sign off on in this other than that driveway issue? Ivy?
Yes, just the modification to the driveway width and general location. Also the material, they are proposing to change it from gravel, which you all approved at the May meeting, to concrete. And then the third thing would be the revised setbacks.
Okay.
I'm a little confused myself. There's a, this little drawing here. It indicates an area which takes the end of 2 lots on 6th Street. We approved 516 construction. Does this affect that lot? It seems like these are conflicting. I'm trying to figure out the footprint of this thing.
So this would only impact 514 9th Street. Earlier in this evening, you already approved the 2-foot section of driveway on 512 9th Street. So if you're looking at it down at an aerial, that's the one to the left, and 516 is the one to the right. So this would have no impact to 516 9th Street.
Okay.
516 was the one they're requesting a variance for,
That's correct.
and that's not before us today at all.
That's correct. It's not.
Out of curiosity, do we know what's happened with the variance?
They were approved. Was granted.
Was granted?
Yes.
What was confusing me, it looks like here on this drawing, here's the lot line of 516, and a chunk of that is taken up now by driveway. This is a little confused by the drawings.
Oh, so currently they have not officially submitted this yet, but they have a plan to submit to zoning for a recombination. So the lot line on the right side right now officially has not changed, but the site plan that they submitted shows what that recombined lot width would be, and it extends approximately 10 feet to the east. So once that's officially submitted through zoning, it will be reflected on the map, but because it's not approved by the assessor's office, that's why you won't
But
see
has
it.
no bearing on what we approved on 516.
That's correct.
Oh, that's what I'm trying to, okay.
I think unless we have something else to say, just to treat this the same way as did 512, to wait to see that the certified arborist approves the driveway will not hurt the roots of the pine, of the pecan tree in front.
Well, in this particular lot, the commission did already approve the removal of that tree on the property. At the
That
May
one, but not the,
meeting-
yeah.
At the main meeting, so the driveway wouldn't have any impact.
No, I'm not sure. I'm just talking about the same condition to delay the driveway approval until we get the arborist to decide that we're not hurting the pecan tree that's on the city right away.
Well, technically, that portion of the driveway that could impact the tree is only on 512.
Except that if we move it over, then it'll be an issue, won't it? If he shifts it, depending on what the
if-
arborist said, it could be an issue.
I think they would only ultimately, I mean, and I don't want to speak out of turn on this. It's my thought that they would only impact the lip or the flare of the driveway that is in front of 512 9th Street. So it wouldn't potentially impact the flare of the driveway in front of 514. Does that make sense?
No, I understand that, but he was saying that he could shift it and do whatever. And my thought that if he's shifting it, it might impact.
Yeah, she's just speaking on I think the area that would be shifting, if I'm correct. The area that would be shifting would be more so the area that's dealing with the factor on 512, not 514.
So you wouldn't be shifting it further into 514.
That's correct. We would just change the flare, the curving, the way all that was pertaining to the distance from the tree to the actual curb.
I don't think that the location on the driveway itself, the 12-feet drive, the
That's
mostly
right.
portion going between the properties would be impacted. It would just simply be the flare going in the section of the public right of way in front of 512, I believe.
making a judgment on the composition of the driveway too. You know, it's not just the
Right.
the siting of it and the geography of it, but the composition, which I think the pervious is much better than gravel.
And just to make note that staff did include a condition, a proposed condition in their report that it be pervious concrete.
Any more questions for the applicant? Thank you. Any public hearing part? No? Deliberations? Motion?
I move to approve with conditions the request to modify the driveway and garage setbacks approved under certificate of appropriateness MJW-21-52 at 514 Nunn Street. Details as shown on the drawings, plans, photographs, submittals, and narrative statement contained in the application, and supplemental materials and statements made at this meeting are part of this request unless otherwise noted. This motion is based on the evidence presented before us, the application, submittals, testimony, staff report, including findings of fact. The following conditions will be applied to ensure compliance with the design standards, those set forth in the staff report 1 through 7. The proposed request with condition complies with the Wilmington design standards for historic districts and landmarks, that it is compatible with the materials, features, design, context, and character of the historic district in which it's located, and is congruous with the site, streetscape, and historic aspects of the historic district residential as a whole. Applicable design standards, 2.2 public right-of-way, standard 2, 2.4 walkways, driveways, and off-street parking, standard 4.
Second, anybody?
Second.
Steve, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 8.
So here we have the City Market Building, originally constructed in 1879, and it is a contributing resource to the historic district. The property is located at 124 South Front Street and extends the full length of the block down to South Water Street. The property is located in the Central Business District, Historic District overlay. The application before you today is for the removal of the contributing status of the building for the purpose of retaining the full allowable building height in the Central Business District. Section 18-196K of the Land Development Code states that an applicant may seek approval to remove the contributing status of the building for the purpose of retaining allowable building height. The applicant must apply to the Historic Preservation Commission to remove the status, and they must demonstrate that the building has little or no significance in 4 categories, and when scored, has a total combined score of less than 6 points. Approval of the request does not modify the status of the building for any other purpose beyond retaining its allowable building height. Here are photographs of the current building. The top photo shows the front elevation along South Front Street, and the bottom photo shows the rear elevation along South Water Street. And here are some photos showing the evolution of the building. The first is a postcard of the City Market, the original City Market building, not long after it was constructed. In the middle is a photograph from the 1970s, and at the bottom is a photograph of the building as it exists today. Significant modifications have been made to the building since initial construction. Archival data indicates that the building has undergone at least 3 significant exterior renovations. According to the book Wilmington, North Carolina, an architectural and historical portrait, the building was built in 1879 and underwent renovations in 1912, 1919, 1930, 1944, and 1960. The building opened in 1880 and soon after was purchased by the city in 1882. In 1919, at the expiration of the market lease, the building was converted to an auditorium. In 1923, it was a producer's market for farm products and functioned only between auditorium uses. In 1930, it was renovated for full market use. Another renovation took place in 1944. And in 1960, the city council sold the building and it was renovated for office space. Staff found 2 previous approvals to demolish the city market building by the HPC. On September 20th, 1983, the Historic Preservation Commission granted approval to demolish the building after determining it had lost its significance. At the time, local historian Ed Turnberg, then chair of the HPC, noted that architecturally and historically, the building had lost a lot of its significance through serious alterations. The HPC again granted approval for demolition, and a COA was issued on April 18th, 1989 to demolish the building due to structural limitations and foundation issues, and based on research presented to the HPC at the 1983 meeting to demonstrate the building had limited architectural significance. In light of the building's history, the applicant is seeking approval to remove the contributing status of the building for the purpose of retaining allowable building height in accordance with the provisions set forth in section 18-196K of the Land Development Code. The applicant submitted a proposed scorecard with a total score of 0.25 out of a possible 12 points. According to the code, if the score is less than 6 points, then the building has little or no significance. With that, we would like to enter the staff report into the record for tonight's proceedings.
I have a question, Ivy. Does anyone verify that scorecard? Like, do you do your own independent scoring?
We do not. It would be up to the commission to look at the proposed score to see if it is compatible with the areas identified in the code, those 4 categories, if they felt that it was justifiable and the building had lost significance in those areas.
And are they proposing to tear down the entire building?
We have not had any application for any such request at this time. The applicant has only submitted an application to remove the contributing status.
Okay, so then that would be a subsequent issue. Would there be the 365 days? And
It's likely that it would come to that, yes.
so the contributor status allows them to retain the old height requirements that was in the original building, correct?
That's not, so basically, if it's not a contributing structure in the CBD, then they would outright have an allowable height up to 50 feet. If they were not to seek approval, if they were not granted approval to remove the contributing status, they would not be allowed to reach that full 50-foot height. They would only be able to, and I did a little math here, but the numbers are approximate based on what we know with the building. They would only be allowed, they would be limited to a build back height of 32 and 33 feet respectively because of the grade change from Front Street down to Water Street. So limited to 32 or 33 feet as opposed to the allowable building height in the district of 50 feet.
And that's what our decision is today.
That's correct. If the contributing status were removed, then they would be permitted to go up to the 50-foot mark. Of course, the commission would review any development proposal in the future and look at its compatibility in terms of height as well as other aspects of the project. You're not essentially granting them outright access to that 50 feet, but they would be allowed to go up to that allowable 50-foot height.
And if we deny the historic part, we're forcing them to 32. Or keeping them at the 32-foot height, which doesn't mean they're not going to come back to want to demolish the building for the 365-day stay.
That's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ivy?
And this demolition has been approved twice in the past, once in 83 and once another time, but was that not also a part of that prior to that being allowed to be demolished then? Was it not taken off? It wasn't taken out of the contributing structure at that point?
Sure. So the section of code that regulates the contributing status was not enacted and adopted until 2011. So the 2 previous approvals for demolition occurred in the 80s. And so there was no reason to remove the contributing status at that time. It didn't exist, I guess you might say.
When were the columns, when was the building changed to go to one story from what it originally was, which was a beautiful building?
So we believe that there was another alteration to the facade of the building that occurred somewhere from the early 1900s to 1960. So there was a third alteration that occurred to the building. And then again, by 1970, it was down to this one story that you see today.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's a beautiful building.
And just so you know, the applicant is here tonight, so they'll be able to speak a little bit
Okay.
more perhaps on the proposal.
Anything else for staff?
I want to be clear on the scoring system. Did staff do that, or did the applicant supply that and
Sure. So the code stipulates what those 4 categories are, and it allocates 3 points to each of those categories for a total of 12 points allowable. It's up to the applicant to propose what they feel is appropriate in those 4 categories. And then, of course, this is an evidentiary hearing, so they present that as evidence to the commission for approval to demonstrate that there's little or no significance to the building. And the commission would actually have to score it.
I'm sorry, I missed that last part. Say that again, about the commission scoring, using this scoring rubric?
Yeah, you would have to look at the evidence and essentially, you might say, provide a score that you felt was appropriate based on the code section plus the applicant's proposed scoring mechanism.
And you have that to show, put on the slide, their scorecard?
I do not, but as part of the packet, we put a blank scorecard on the last page after the code section so that you all would have a copy of that.
When we go through this, can you tell us what they did?
It's
Because I
shown in the package there.
I know, but I don't have it with
page
me.
And I have a question there. They said that the structure will be given a score of 3 points.
That's what they did.
Unless the
Okay, gotcha.
structural engineer certifies that it's not safe or structural, and there's no value given for that in the applicants.
Correct, because in the attachments, they have a structural engineer report that was submitted. We just simply
Okay,
redacted
that's
the
part of
seal. It's part of the attachments.
You know, remember who the engineer was or is?
Tim Hines.
Oh, okay.
And I just
All
have to
right, thank
point
you.
out, this isn't, I don't mean this is an indictment on this particular proposal in front of us, but this section of the land development code, when used to identify properties that are contributing or non-contributing, I feel it's just ridiculous. I mean, if you followed this, you could probably convert 90% of the properties in the historic district to non-contributing. I mean, I've never seen this before. I'm just so dissatisfied with it, honestly, and hopefully at some
It's
point. we
rather
can-
unique.
It's very odd.
And it doesn't seem to be structurally inadequate. I mean, all the spaces are occupied, all the spaces are rented. There's no building inspection code that says it's structurally inadequate. So I don't know how that could be.
I would like to just speak to the code section itself for just a moment. This was adopted in 2011. It was a joint effort of Historic Wilmington Foundation and the city to come up with this language. We recognize that calling it removal of contributing status is a little confusing and perhaps inappropriate. So in the new code, it takes away that title. It's not called that anymore. The intention behind the language was to encourage the preservation of contributing buildings, particularly outside of the local district and the overlay where there is no real other protection for those buildings. So the thought being, if there's a height penalty for whatever is built new, that perhaps a developer may find a more creative solution to preserving the existing building. It hasn't worked especially well for us in the way that we had hoped that it would, but it does remain in our new code. It's reworded somewhat to remove the false impression that the contributing status is actually removed because we don't have the authority to do that. So we're not actually removing it. But it does carry forward into the new code. And if you have questions about the code language itself, I'd be glad to answer those for you.
So now you've confused me.
Sorry.
Yeah, you said that the purpose was to penalize by not allowing the same height by
Right.
removing contributory status,
Correct.
right? But before you said that well, maybe I misunderstood the conclusion that if it was contributory, it would be 50. And if it was not contributory, it was 32.
So this process, essentially, forget about the removing contributing status. If you weren't contributing at all, if you were just a blank slate, empty lot, the maximum allowable building height in this part of this central business district would be 50 feet.
Okay.
So because there is a contributing building on the lot, the code now says, if you tear down that building without going through the process that the applicant has requested you to review tonight, the maximum height allowable instead of 50 feet would be around 32 feet. So there's a penalty of about roughly 20 feet, 18 feet there.
You call it a penalty.
Well, so the maximum height, right. The development community feels like it's a penalty. The maximum height is 50 feet, but instead they could only build to 32. They wouldn't be able to maximize that building height. In this end of downtown, the building heights are relatively low. It's more impactful in the northern part of downtown where the maximum building height is closer to 200 feet and you're potentially losing significantly more building height.
Could we stipulate somewhere that it has to be congruous, like with 1890s sort of architecture?
When they come in with a new development, you could.
Yeah.
At this point, the only thing that you're being asked to consider is to assign a score to the building as to whether that height penalty should be applied or not applied. So effectively, if you do what we now call removing the status, then you are saying they are eligible for the full 50 feet of building height. Now, of course, they have to come forward to you with first is request for demolition and also a request to build something new. So potentially 2 more steps.
Yeah, but again, it's not a penalty the way you phrase that. I mean, the building has a certain standard because it's a contributing structure. It's not a penalty, the fact that they can't build to 50 feet because it's not a contributing structure. It's just the nature of what the code calls it. So I don't interpret that as being defined as a penalty against the applicant because of the nature of the status, So how tall of a building could he put there in the future if the contributing status is removed? You said 50 feet?
50 feet would be the maximum.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And how much time do we have to come up with a score as a commission if that's, if we're charged to do that?
That's what you need to do right now. Assign a score to it.
Well, I don't personally feel knowledgeable enough to do that in this meeting.
And how can we give it a score on the structural integrity by not walking through the building? I mean, I disagree with the structural integrity point system that they have here, and I'm sure Christopher and I could walk through that building and it would have some point value based on, and
You may assign it a different point value based on your interpretation of the code standard, certainly. You do not have to agree to the applicant's proposed point valuation.
I have a proposal. Is this something that staff can research and do, and then we approve staff's scorecard? Because, there's, some of this doesn't require an engineer to do it, but it still requires a lot more than we can do at this meeting. I mean, I agree with that. So is it something that you all could do and then we at the next meeting agree with, or amend what you recommend.
I think you could request that staff present additional evidence at a later meeting, but as far as drawing the conclusions, you all would have to.
How about if they propose and then we conclude?
How about a field trip?
I mean, again, if
I'm in.
if you want them to
Yeah, a report or a recommendation.
additional evidence as to structure, or I'm just looking through the different criteria. But you all would need to be the ones who make the actual conclusions, because it's an evidentiary hearing and you have to be the deciding body.
Right, but we could ask staff to say, okay, for item A1, A little I, A2 little i's, this is the evidence for this, or now we don't know if there's any important people that are involved, that there's any significance, and we don't know any of that. So if that kind of the background for each item could be given to us, then I think that would help us do that. Can we do that? Request that?
We are not in a position to evaluate the structural integrity of the building. We can certainly provide additional evidence regarding the history and the evolution of the architecture, but neither Ivy nor I are qualified to.
We aren't either, though.
Well, how is the commission supposed to?
Yeah, how are we supposed to
qualify?
do integrity?
There, I believe it's possible to request aid from CHIPO. It's not, their report would be non-binding, but it would be an educated report on the status of this building. And I think that is true. They will review. Is that not so? So
I mean, like, we're not tearing down the ice house or something, that we're gonna say, yeah, demolish it. And then, it's something that is of historical significance. I mean, that we know some history around it and,
Yeah, there's so many things here about.
and can it be, can we continue up from it? Some just things about it.
Can they build on top of the existing building? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, and I mean, I'm sure they can, but is it worth it? I mean, is it some sort of, is there something there that we should not be messing with or tearing down?
well, I think that if the state came in, evaluated it, they would, in their report, would give their recommendation about the value of the remaining portion of that original market. And again, it's not a binding, but it's an educated report of their findings, which exceed my understanding and ability to grade the building.
Do you have any idea how long that would take?
It could take several months. And
That's what
to
I
the
would
best
think.
of my knowledge, there's not an engineer on staff at the state office. It would be similar to the process that they use to review when we ask them to consider a local landmark designation.
Oh, wow.
So it would be intense, but I'm sure they would respond.
In the conclusion, they were saying that there were so many things wrong that was not economical to fix. That to me would be a lot, knowing more about that aspect, which again would be, I can't evaluate what they're
Sure,
saying,
and
obviously.
I'm sure the applicant is prepared
Okay.
to talk about that with you.
But that would help us also, even if it's contributory, or we can't necessarily know all this, but if we know that the structure is not sound, so that there's such an expense to bring it up to the level. And wasn't this behind, we already approved somebody doing something to a restaurant back there a few months ago?
Yes.
Yeah, they were gonna put in a garage door in
Okay.
lieu of the cheese shop or cheese factory, whatever.
So in a way, this is a preliminary decision before they decide if they're demolishing.
I believe that's the route that they've taken. Yes, they want to go one
So I
step
guess
at
we
a
should
time.
ask the applicant now,
Yes.
if you'd like to come up.
And if I may make just a quick point, if it's helpful at all in the commission's review of the categories, say for instance, the structural integrity for 3D, the purpose of the engineer report is to provide the commission some evidence. So if they felt that the engineer's report was valid, then that would provide you the evidence. You would then therefore need to say allocate 0 points to that section as a whole. And so for section 3A for cultural significance, we did provide the history that we have on the building and did not identify any significant events or lives of persons that have made a contribution to history. So based on that information, you know, you might say that that would validate 0 points because there's no evidence or history for that section. So it seems a little complicated, but when you start to break it down, it's not quite as complicated as that seems. Again, you know, a well-known or highly regarded builder, we don't have any evidence to that effect. No history has been documented to that. So, you know, that potentially would be 0 points.
And this item in and of itself, just by itself, this thing in a vacuum, like that someone dealing with this building at some point had to have some state or national significance, just as so elitist. You know, I mean, it's like.
And if you look at item 3B, the structure has maintained the integrity of the original form. Well, through the photo documentation, staff did present evidence that it has not.
Well, what about the floor plan? It's been a city market from day one. It's always, and to me, the interior is far more important than the exterior on this particular building because it still maintains the integrity of being a market, the way the whole floor plan is worked. So the fact that it has no integrity, I would question that as well as a number of these other things.
But it wasn't a market the whole time, right? It was an event center or
So
assembly?
that's a valid point. And the excerpts that I found from the book with the several renovations that have taken place over time, it talks about the fact that it was converted to an auditorium and then put back to a market space. And then later in the 60s, it was renovated for office use. So we can say that the use is similar, but unfortunately, we don't have any evidence as to what the market layout was originally with the 1898.
Well, have the building inspectors posted an unsafe building, or have the electrical inspectors gone in and say that the electrical system is bad? Or I don't understand that there were 0 points given. You know, it says that the building is there, which means it's still standing and functioning. Then it should be given a value of 3 points. I mean, the building is still there. They're renting the spaces. Their bathrooms, it's handicap accessible. So I don't understand quite how that figure was derived. But I mean, that's for, yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I understand how, but I don't understand.
But it doesn't ask us for any electrical or quality. All it asks really, if you look at this, is more of a who did it, whether architecturally it looks like. It doesn't ask for soundness. It doesn't ask for any kind of quality control.
And you said, Avi, that you don't know who did it, who designed the building or anything?
We do not have any documentation on that. Some history has been done on the building, and I did find notations at the 1983 meeting where Ed Turberg did do historic research on the property, on the building itself, and found that it had little to no significance. So he did look into some of the archives and the history of the building and found no such evidence to some of those areas of the
Well, if
categories.
it's not, you know, and nobody famous lived there, you know, I don't know that we have much to go on. as
Well,
far as, you know,
what do the points mean? I mean, if it gets a score of 4, what does that mean? Or if it gets a score of 3?
I'm not sure what the initial inclination was when they were writing the code.
6 is the cutoff.
Yeah, it's one of those, don't you wish you were a fly on the wall at the time to understand what the thought process was. The only thing that we can go off of at this time is the allocation that they were prescribed to each category. And the code stipulates that if it's 6 or less, then the building has little or no significance. And you might in essence say that it would qualify for removal of status.
You can almost see that A, B, and C we can almost agree with all the zeros except for the last. The one that I think is hard to agree is because it gets a little more structural is D. We cannot do D. That's where Ron's coming in. They're asking about walls and roofs. That we can't do. But I can see where we could do A, B, and C to pretty much.
With more information, but we don't.
Right. But I don't think we can do D.
Well, D would be your evaluation of the engineer report that they submitted.
Oh.
If you felt that it was valid.
I mean, the style is, you know,
Okay.
originally, yeah, it's great. But
Well, to me, this whole thing is about the money, okay? Because basically, under the conditions, right now, they can do 32 feet. If we remove it, it's 50. Now, that's air rights. They get another 18 feet, which means a 4-story building instead of a 3-story building, and this property is worth a lot more money. So I look at it this way. I'm not, if they want to tear this one down now or tear it down later, but I think they just want to remove it because more money. Now, our question is this thing historic or not? And
Right.
this little list right here,
Uh,
I mean,
yeah, like, did somebody famous live there, or is it beautiful? If it looked like that, one, I think we would be having a totally different.
You mean the one in
discussion.
1890s? Yeah.
We would be having a totally different discussion than we would be in 2021. We're sort of talking about the basement.
Completely understandable. And that's why we did try to do additional research, and we did find those two approvals in 1983 and 1989, where there was a finding of little to no significance for the building and demolition was approved.
has anyone checked the Carolina room?
This is a guess, but I'm assuming that Ed Thornburg did when he was doing his research.
I did also, and didn't find anything beyond what's in your staff report. A lot of what you have in the staff report did come from the North Carolina room. Yes.
Thank you.
Can we hear from the applicant?
Hi, how are you? Eric Hemingway. My address is 1705 Chestnut.
So what is it you plan to do with this building?
Well,
That's the big elephant in the room.
at this point, we're just trying to take the first step through the process the city set up with removing the contributing status before we take anything any further.
And the only reason to do that is because you want to tear it down.
Well, we just want to explore all of our options at this point.
What is your, do you have any particular sort of use for the property? Do you know?
In the future or currently?
In the future?
We don't know what
Depending on what we say, right?
I don't know what I'm going to be able to do, so I
Uh-huh.
can't really answer that. I mean, we want to keep it commercial space, obviously. It's,
Is this property sound enough that you could build up on top of this or not?
not from the research done by our structural engineer, no,
So you would have to demolish it.
unfortunately.
No,
So-
it's not unfortunate. I mean, it's not beautiful, you know.
It's not beautiful now, no. I wish it looked like the original picture,
Yeah, I
for
do
sure.
too. We wouldn't be having another discussion, like I said, but, yeah.
Ms. Wilson, I can speak to your question a little bit. In the 1989 approval for the demolition, that was also one of the impetuses for doing it because they first explored building on top of it. And they had a certified engineer submit a report saying that that was not possible.
I was living in the district that's 2 blocks from this property when the original developer floated his plan, Mr. Eccles. I knew Ed Turberg and I had great respect for him and the commission that not once but twice voted to demolish the building. However, it's in our hands now. And I feel like it's a significant decision that we need to make. And I personally would feel comfortable at least reaching out to the state and asking them for a timetable and would they review and contribute their knowledge to the status of this building. And I would be very comfortable with that. I don't feel, I think that the interpretation of this grade system is very nebulous. And depending on whoever's hands it's in, and now it's put before us, I think an expert could make an argument in any direction they wanted to. And if our staff are not qualified to do it, I certainly don't feel qualified to do it. And I think we should postpone this item and reach out to the state and see if they would help us out with this.
We had the engineer's report, a certified engineer, about the condition of everything.
That's correct.
That was because I read it, but it wasn't clear on who it was.
Sure. The applicant engaged an engineer and they submitted a report. It's part of the attachments you have in your packet.
I guess looking at this score sheet, don't see it as being as difficult as I thought at first, especially since you've addressed some of the specific points. So I don't have as much of a problem as I did in the initial.
I mean, I think that an engineer says that it's not, that we can't go up. We would have to approve anything that went there.
And the cost of repairs were so
But
expensive.
the applicant's
I
not
don't
requesting that.
Yeah,
that
I agree.
something be built on top of the building. I mean, we're just conjecturing about that.
No,
So,
we can't do that.
yeah, so I think, we just have to look at what the applicant is asking for.
And, yeah.
And the
not-
engineer's
and-
report.
and say demolish or not, right?
I mean, we all can kind of speculate among ourselves as to what's going to happen to the building, but I just, for some reason, feel a loss of that building. It's a marketplace and it's been there, even though it's gone through some transitions, it's always come back to its original use of the marketplace. And obviously the building is very ugly. It's been beat up and ravaged over time. And I can totally understand where the applicant is coming from, as far as what his future plans may be for the building. But I feel like with the matrix, as Joan has said, we've kind of overcome some of the complications. And even if we gave it a total of 3 points on the engineer's report, because the building is standing, it's occupied, it hasn't been condemned by the building inspectors. So, but even if we gave it a 3, that's not going to get it to the 6th level that we would need. And I don't feel like any of those other factors that we can really prove, who lived there or who did what and where we are. So,
I mean, they would have given that to us.
Yeah, because there's no information on it, right? And my concern is not, let's say we're not going higher. That's not an issue today, but the fact that there's such a difficult repair situation anyway. I mean, it's so expensive.
Once we do this, he could demolish the building, and he can, what he's wanting to do, as we well know, is he wants to gain an additional floor from that building, which, I mean, that's just pure economics. And I certainly applaud that part of it, but.
And just a quick note that they would not be guaranteed it. So they would be allowed to potentially ask for it. But ultimately, any new development would come back before the HBC and would be reviewed for compatibility in terms of style,
Yeah, we
form, and height.
we can go look at that one over there and say, now that looks good. Yeah.
We'll give you the condition that you rebuild the building as it was in the beginning.
Well, honestly, I'd be a little happier if, obviously, it's going to be mixed use. The first floor is going to be commercial. So, I mean, in the future, if this ever came about, if that first floor was sort of a retail commercial maybe you can call it the marketplace again or something like that to carry on. But yes, as far as this current issue, I mean, because correct me if I'm wrong, after a 365-day stay, they could demolish it anyway.
Yes.
They just wouldn't get the other floors. So one
Yes.
way or the other, they can bulldoze the building.
Right. And they have already have tenants, so they can wait through 65 if we don't lower it.
Well, again, I come back to, in fairness to the applicant and in fairness to the community, we're a representation of that. I think we need an expert opinion on this to help us make the right decision.
I think we're ready. I think. with the
Make a
first
motion.
three.
Make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion
Go ahead.
to approve.
Oh, sorry. Public hearing. Do you have anything you want to add? I'm sorry. We kind
No,
of
I'm
took
good.
over your conversation.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And does anyone want to present any? Did you be sworn in? Amy?
Weren't you ready?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Glad to be in here with
You
y'all.
you did not speak up.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, Jen and I had a conversation, just try to listen, be respectful, but just, I think I've seen you all since this has been on the docket, and I've respected the process and waited to the right moment to address our concerns. I'm Travis Gilbert from the Historic Wilmington Foundation. Several key members of our Urban Properties and Preservation Action Committee and I have been discussing not only this scenario here, but this larger idea within the current land development code and the proposed land development code. The word we have been using, and it's been hard to wrap our brain around, is this seems like not it's an incentive to remove the contributing status to, exactly as you all were discussing, add another story to the property. I don't think anybody can logically argue and say that that building has lost its contributing status. I mean, it certainly looks much different. It's a shame that our community lost that beautiful structure. But I think our nightmare about this process played out this evening. And I would love that the commissioners take a moment to consider the precedent of this. It makes me very concerned that it seemed like there wasn't an awareness of how this process would play out until we've been sitting here for 3 hours. And then this table was thrown in front of you. And the only numbers that you have to go off of are numbers that were submitted by the property owner. That is concerning to me, the lack of data. The staff here is incredible. Ivy and Christine, I'm sure, did a wonderful job going to the resources that exist. We all miss Ed, and he did miss some things back in the day. We see that with our new plaques when we're getting those repainted. But this seems to be thoroughly vetted. I just wonder how this will play out with the next building. Will this same process play out where we've been sitting here for 3 hours and maybe that building has a little more information to be uncovered? And will that information be presented to the commissioners and in a process or a time frame that allows you to deliberate on the facts, on the evidence? So I guess I'm just concerned about the precedent this is setting. By no means is the Historic Wilmington Foundation trying to suggest this building.
So your suggestion that Michael said that we wait and get some more information is probably the best way to table this tonight?
I don't think it's proper for me to make suggestions. I'm just airing our concerns about this process. I'm not sure if taking this to the State Historic Preservation Office would be a speedy process, or that they would come up with any information that the staff here has not already uncovered with the resources that exist here in Wilmington. I just wanted to state my concern about what has just played out here in the past 30 minutes. It seemed that it was very ad hoc, the facts, the chart, the scoring, and that the data that you're going off of to make this decision was submitted by the applicant, be it that information correct, worthy, biased, unbiased, et cetera. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you all today.
And I kind of agree to some extent, which is what we were saying in the beginning, is whether staff could give us an independent kind of score sheet that we would then approve or not approve. And I get that that's not your role. But I think in this, and again, there is precedent in everything we do, but I think there's enough engineering evidence here that takes it a little bit away from, helps a lot. In my opinion, it helps a lot. And then because the building hasn't preserved almost nothing of what was the original value of it, that it's a little easier on this one. But I agree with Travis's concerns for a future process, that it's too big a deal to throw it in as an agenda item, that all of a sudden we're scoring something at a meeting like this. I think that's tough. I do.
I agree. I mean, when he said that, I mean, it looked like a no-brainer, but we're setting a precedent.
In terms of
I'm
process,
going
yeah.
to have chain link fences in front of Carolina Heights, so, you know, but, yeah, it's.
Or that maybe we create a different.
In a front yard, but, you know, I think it's not good to make rash, especially on this. I mean, we've never seen anything like this.
I know. And maybe we should have a different process under HPC in general for something like this in the
Well, the
future.
process is actually in the land development code, so it's been determined by city council. So to change that structure would have to be addressed with city council and changing the land development code. If you're suggesting that you all would prefer, before something like this comes to you, additional information or
Our internal
something like
process,
that.
not the code process, our internal one.
Okay, so you're
Yeah,
just
that's all
saying-
I'm suggesting.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That there's, no, that's
I mean,
fine.
Michael, you said it should come from where, the state?
Well, I know they will do that. And again, it's not binding, but, you know, again, it may be a slow process.
I'd be afraid
just
there'll
in
be
reading that they offer that service regarding properties at risk, and they are the experts. I certainly don't feel qualified tonight to say this building should come down. You know, we're supposedly a representation of the community, but I don't feel skilled at this, and particularly being presented with it and not educated on the system. I sat and read it a couple of times, and it was my belief that it didn't score. It didn't reach 6 or above, and that it spoke for itself. But learning more about it, I think that, you know, we're about to go down a road that is going to be precedent setting, and the history of this, even though it is so altered, is significant. It's one building that could be lost, and it may need to come down, but I don't feel skilled at making that decision.
Which, and I agree, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but they can take this building down whether we agree to it or not in a year.
Well, that's
It's
always
the
case.
difference is the point of how much value it is in terms of future construction.
Well, that's always been the case in terms of, you know, even a stay of demolition is to give the applicant and all parties to sit down and try to work out a way to save the building or.
Just to learn more
And
about it.
ultimately, if the applicant wants to do that, that is and can happen. But on the first night of hearing about this, that we say, oh yeah, okay, I vote for removing the status and let it move forward for an application for being torn down. I'm not comfortable with that.
Did you want to say something?
Yes, David Lyle, 614 Market Street. I have an architecture firm here in town, Lyle Architecture, and I worked with the applicant in the research, going and inside the building and outside of the building and understanding the history of it. I've been working in here for almost 25 years and doing historic renovations in downtown. And I understand what your all significance is in looking at this, but from an architectural standpoint and from a structural standpoint, this building doesn't hold anything other than its memory of what it was at one point. It is a failing building and it will continue to be that way. And the cost associated with it to bring it back to even maintain where it is now is substantial. And so I just wanted to let you know that this wasn't the owner just coming up and filling these things out. We participated in filling it out and making sure that it was accurate and true in all areas of those questions.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any questions for Mr. Lyle?
And Mr. Smith, I just wanted to say thank you for your comments. The one thing I might just add is that luckily with the code prescribing these categories, every application would be looked at on a case-by-case basis because of the unique circumstances involved with each building and what levels of integrity it may or may not still retain. So the impact of setting too much precedent, I don't think that there's too much concern with that respect, just because of the analysis that would be done with the categories, the breakdown of the categories. So hopefully just to put your mind at ease with that regard.
Well, I appreciate your presentation, and yet I'm not sure we can be guaranteed of that. I mean, we had another agenda item that was pulled tonight for a 70-year-old building that was an application made to destroy. I mean, we could see a real movement of our older buildings under attack. And, you know, as the stewards for preservation, I just think we need to do everything we can to make the right call. And I do appreciate and understand that each application for such as this would stand alone and have different merits and risks, but I'm very uncomfortable in voting in a positive way to remove this status tonight.
I think there's nothing more we can say. I think we should just vote and decide if it goes forward or not.
Actually, Joan, if I could submit, I know that one of the charges of the commissions by, I don't know whether it's by 160D in the state statute or whatever the case may be, but one of the charges of any body like ours, there's so many things that this commission can do. 15 things. We wind up just generally ruling on fences and pergolas and pools and windows and things like that. But one of those many things is to work with a building owner, a homeowner, a landowner, and help them understand, or maybe they could help us understand. I wonder if this could go to an executive session or something to that effect, where sometime between now and the next time that this can be brought to us, that we can all get together and hear some more about this. It just seems like such a vacuum of a session where we just don't have enough. And I have a relationship with the applicant myself, and I'm really conflicted about this on a couple of different levels, but I have some ideas about other ways to go about this that I would feel more comfortable with granting this if that could be heard. And I don't think this is the venue for it, but I wonder if there's another opportunity, some other way that we can do that thing that we're allowed to do and supposed to do at times, and actually execute that in some executive session or whatever it may be, just so we can come together a little bit more, whether it's a small committee from this group,
Or like
along with David and Eric, to just understand more about what's going on here, because there's so much uneasiness about this right now that it seems, I don't want to rush into a vote right now. I just don't, no matter what the vote may be.
I have a proposal. Hold on. So look, right now, there is no one, I have not heard the intent that this building is going to be torn down. So that's nebulous. Okay. So at this point, I suggest we simply table this until such time that somebody decides they're going to tear the building down. Now, once they decide this building is going to be torn down, we can't stop them. Most we could do is a 365-day stay. So at that point, now we're back to 32 feet or 50 feet. Wouldn't that be a more appropriate time to remove the status once it's determined the building is actually coming down? Is that a thought?
No, I
Yes.
think that, you know, the architect and the engineers need to know how to design the building now and price out what they
Well,
can do
I
there.
understand that, but I have not heard the intent from the architect or the owner that they intend to tear the building down. Can they declare that?
Well, one of the things that I am just curious about, which wouldn't have to be discussed tonight, but I would like, as Chris said, further discussion about it, is I have seen instances where something is significant to the community, even though the rest of the building can't be saved. Can you save the facade? Is that worth saving? Granted, the current facade doesn't even match the picture of the original one. But does the current facade meet enough to the community that we could ask that that be somehow worked into whatever's going to happen to the property? I mean, that's some of those discussions maybe of finding a compromise, of not losing all of it. But I read the reports. I mean, if the ceiling's about to fall down, that thing's just not going to hold up anyway. And, but where do we take this? Is there any middle ground that we can get to that makes everybody comfortable? And maybe that's some of the discussions that could be had on what actually does come in front of us.
Which I think is what I said before, is having an internal process for this, similar to what you're trying to say, to create a process that maybe there's, like we did for the teller machines and everything else, we had a small committee that dealt with something. So that when this comes up, it goes through an internal process that gets us more information, and you can sit down maybe with the experts and discuss that. I'm not opposed to that we do that too. And we can institute that for this. I mean, we just have a meeting somehow in between this and a vote.
And I don't know how that process works between staff and the commission. Whenever they do some of those other things, like how would that work? That we hear more in a different session from David and Eric about this, and can share other points of view on adaptive reuse and other types of structural engineering with steel superstructures and things like that.
And we've not had anybody come up and oppose it either, you know, but probably nobody knows about it, you know, either. But we've not had any, I mean, it's not like the Ice House or something, you know, or a mural downtown where people are up in arms about it. So.
I might just make a quick point that we're only allowed to review the application based on the evidence submitted. So if the commission did feel like evidence was lacking, perhaps that's something that they would request of the applicant to submit more information.
And I just wanted to correct something. It doesn't say that the roof is falling in on the building. I've read this report twice sitting over here, and some of it is very nebulous. Some of it is very common kind of terms, and some of the problems that the concrete slab has numerous cracks. That's pretty standard in any concrete slab, particularly one probably of this age. So I think personally that the engineering report has some fluff in there, and I don't know, I've not inspected the building myself, so I don't really, I'm not questioning the engineer's report, but there are a lot of things in there that another engineer might might feel differently about. So,
I wouldn't go there with what happened in Florida. Somebody
Well,
says something
it is possible, I
wrong with the
think.
concrete slab, I would say, no,
well,
take
that
it
would
down.
be a poor decision, but I think.
You know, I mean, and it's not done properly with the right rebar and up to code, like, you know, it probably should be done, and no. I am sure that the concrete slab is not up to code.
If,
How do you know that?
you know, it is
What gives you
possible that
expertise
the
to make that statement? I mean, what gives you that expertise to make that statement?
I worked in the steel business for 26 years.
All right, thank you.
I think it is possible that the chair can call a special meeting of the commission, and it would be, as Chris has mentioned, to discuss this as a commission, invite the applicant, but and start exploring options and discussion, dialogue related to this. But and at that point, while we were waiting for that to occur, we could certainly make a call to the state and see what their timetable is and how that plays out. But I think either my recommendation is that we deny this tonight or continue it for another month until such a meeting has taken place.
Sometimes the applicant likes to take the option that of carrying this over to the next meeting or the second meeting down the road, some other date certain, versus voting on it tonight. And I wonder if Eric has any opinion on that. I'm sorry. If you have any opinion on whether we just hold this over for a month or two or actually vote tonight, would you mind if we just held this for a month or two so we can discuss it more in some other session to learn more about what just learn more about it, just so we feel more comfortable with, I can't see, I could see myself taking away this contributing status, but I would like to share more and I'd like to hear more first, honestly.
That's your all's decision to make, whatever you decide to do. That's not my jurisdiction. I mean, I did spend a good 3-4 days in the North Carolina room researching this before we got to this point, before we even bought the building. I wanted to know what was around it, who owned it, all of that. So I guess that's commission's decision to make. And back to what Ivy had put together in the packet, that it had been approved twice to demolish in the 80s, and it hasn't improved with the last 30 years, 40 years. So, and back to the height restriction, if we go back to the original picture, that's a lot more than 32 feet. So
Are you going to build that back?
I'd love to. I'd love to.
Sir, actually, I mean, again, it would help me a lot if I knew your intent to tear it down or not and build a building there. I mean,
At this point, we're just taking the first step. This is the process that the city council put in place. And
so the first step to tear the building down and build another building, or the first step to just.
before we can even spend money and explore what we can build back, is
Okay.
the first step is just to remove the contributing status.
Okay, that's fair.
So before we waste a lot of money in a direction and then get shut down, we just thought we'd take this first step. So, yeah, the scorecard, we went through it, David and I and Ivy and I, and we went through it together, line by line. That's the process that the city council put out. I think it's Councilman O'Grady. I believe this is the second time that this has been used. And the other one, I don't think went well either. So that's the process in place, like it or not. So here we are.
I personally don't have a problem allowing you to take away the status, but I do think we should try to do a process that's internal one doesn't hit us at a meeting like this with this kind of job to do. It's almost like this could be a meeting all by itself to get an approval for just this kind of thing, because it's too much. We've been here, what, 3-4 hours already, and it's
Can I
like.
make a motion to just delay this for a month so that we have a better chance to be prepared to, because
But we can't do anything. We can't go out and research ourselves. 'Cause we
no,
can't.
but we can certainly make a few phone calls and get some guidance on it. And I don't
I don't know
think,
if we can we?
Well, you wouldn't want to make phone calls individually and get guidance. We could, as staff, we could contact SHPO if that's what you all wanted.
yeah.
We could also have a special meeting as, I think Chris was talking about. That would just be a continuation of this evidentiary hearing. That would be only for this matter so that we could discuss different options and hear other evidence. We could certainly do that as well. And in the meantime, if you wanted to put it into September instead of August, for example, staff could possibly get together and come up with some ideas, some proposals for a process, an internal process. How do you want to approach this? And that may be something we can discuss and try to put in place before we meet again with the applicant and
I think-
get that evidence.
I think that's a really good idea because it's a lot more than, again, whether we're doing a fence or a pergola. It's got much more impact.
Right. And I know you all have spoken about this individual property and how it may not be as much of a concern as the overall precedent. So this individual property might be the perfect one to develop that process, since there's not a whole lot left that's the beautiful structure it was over 100 years ago.
That sounds, does everyone agree with that?
Mhm.
So we move to September, if that's okay, just so we can feel comfortable with this? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we move it to September to
And
get
that
our
would be
ducks in a
September
row.
9th.
September 9th?
September 9th.
And how would we go about setting up a meeting? A special session, you called it? Was that?
Yeah, it would just be a special meeting that could be called. We would consult the statute, make sure we have the proper notice put out. It would be another open meeting. It follows the same
Yep.
open meeting laws. It would have to be publicized and that sort of thing. It just would only be about this.
Yeah.
This case, this process, and make sure that we can devote the time
Right.
needed to it. And we would also, as staff, consult with you all and decide
Okay.
what, kind of like we did with the workshop, what time, place, and such works for you all to have that meeting.
Would you want to set up a little committee that like we did for some of the other issues to work on the process with you?
We, as a subcommittee?
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
I mean, the process part, I think, I'm sorry, but I feel like you've got that part. The committee would just be us meeting again at some point. That, unless you feel that that's appropriate. I don't want to, overturn Joan's thought on it, but
I mean, I think, and I'm going to speak for other staff now too, and they can jump in at any time, but I think as a group, staff can come up with something and maybe present it to you all at the August hearing as far as a process goes, and then we put it into play at the later special meeting. That's just a thought. I mean, anybody help me at this point?
but then the application,
it's
the
9
application
o'clock.
deadline for the September, well, they wouldn't be reapplying. It would just be
Right, it'd be
continued to
continued to a
September.
date
I see,
certain,
yeah.
exactly. And that would be, but if we decided to have a special meeting before then at which you wanted to vote, that could happen as well. It just has to be noticed properly.
Yeah.
But I think we just need some time to figure out the best approach so that everyone feels comfortable with this process on not just this application, but all of the ones that may come in the future.
And just remember, if it were to be a special meeting, the evidence is presented as part of the application, so it would stand as is. No new evidence unless requested by the commission would be submitted. So I don't know if your thought is more just to talk more about the process and how an application like this might look in the future and how to adequately address it, given the time perhaps needed to look into the history of the structure. So a subcommittee potentially could just work that out a little bit and do it in a little bit more of an informal fashion and work things out perhaps.
Well, my proposal was not that we would close this evidentiary hearing, but that at whatever special meeting or when we hear this matter again, the evidentiary hearing would still be open. So you would use what you've learned today as well as any additional evidence that's presented at a later date as a totality to decide and to go through the criteria and assign scores and that sort of thing. So my proposal would be to leave the evidentiary hearing open or to reopen it at the next hearing so that we can have more factual evidence presented.
Mhm. Either of those. Yeah.
I second the motion. All in favor?
So this is to have the evidentiary evidence at the next meeting?
This would, the continuance would be to September the 9th. And I think our discussion was in the meantime, we'll come up with an internal process. And if necessary, we can meet with the applicants at a special meeting that's properly noticed with just the commission and this application so that you have the time to go through that process and consider the additional evidence in addition to what we've learned today. And if not, we'll hear it in September and vote. As a stopgap. That's the date it will be
That's
on.
the end, yeah.
So if for some reason we can't work out a special meeting, that's the date we would hear it again.
And that would be a full commission meeting, not
Yes,
just a
sir.
committee.
Yes, sir. No,
I think
that would be the
everybody
full
needs to be a
commission.
part of
Mhm.
that.
And it's such an unusual process that we very seldom go through. I don't think I've ever gone through it, that it's probably worth the whole commission being a
Yeah.
part of the
Well, I was
decision making.
surprised to see that in some of the language of procedures or what have you, that the chair can request, a meeting with the, and, obviously if it has to be advertised, but
Yes.
a called meeting can occur outside of
Yes.
a monthly meeting.
Okay, item 9.
Did we have a vote? I'm sorry, I know you seconded.
We
Did
voted.
have a vote? Oh, did you?
Didn't we vote?
Seconded the motion, but then.
Oh,
didn't
all in
vote.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'd like to thank the applicant also for working with the commission here and trying to come up with a good process for future issues. I know it's probably more difficult or frustrating for you, but thanks very much for working with us and your understanding of the process.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Right decision.
happens when you're the first one with a new idea.
Thank you.
Okay, so this subject building was built in the 1890s and it is a contributing resource to the historic district. Property is located at 505 Ann Street and is within the historic district residential. In this district, alterations to all facades of a building and site are subject to design review regardless of whether they can be seen from the public right of way. The application before you today is to enclose the second-story porch on the rear elevation of the house. On the right is a photo submitted by the applicant showing the area to be enclosed. The applicant proposes to enclose 95 square feet of space on the rear second-story porch, measuring 14 feet 6 inches wide by 6 feet 3 inches deep and 11 feet 6 inches tall. The applicant proposes to match the existing house siding with 1x6 pine and a 4.5-inch reveal. The corner boards would be wood, 1x4 to match the existing on the house. All colors are also proposed to match the house. The applicant is proposing to install 2 Anderson 400 series Woodwright 1/1 windows. The Anderson and Doors website states that Woodwright windows are protected by a Fibrex composite exterior. Fibrex is a blend of wood fibers and thermoplastic polymer. Vinyl windows are a synthetic polymer. Because the design standards state that vinyl clad windows are inappropriate and because Fibrex contains a similar polymer, it is believed that the proposed material would be inappropriate in relation to the language in the design standards. Therefore, a condition has been proposed that the windows be made of wood. The design standards state that rear and side porches may be converted to sunrooms if the new design is compatible with the architectural style of the house. And with that, we would like to enter the staff report in its entirety into the record for tonight's proceedings.
Does anybody have any questions for staff? No? Okay, then is the applicant present?
Kyle Kelsey with Source Contracting representing Revitalize ILM at 505 Ann Street.
Do
What a
have,
night.
do you have anything you want to add to what staff presented?
Yeah, I would just, outside of what she said in reference to the windows, the windows that are there are not original windows to the house either, and they are formed of the same similar material. So.
Anybody have anybody have any questions?
Am I to understand you're revitalizing this entire house?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because it's about to demolition by neglect stage here.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank
All
goodness.
right, so
something's
you're
getting done with
redoing
it.
the house and this is just an addition.
We're redoing the whole house. Most
Do a
all,
good job.
sir.
I said, do a good job. It's got a mess back there.
Oh, yeah, it is quite a mess. Yep. But most of the work is happening interior. This is the major exterior alteration that we're making to the house. So.
And is that door to stay?
The back door?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
Is that another application? I mean, it looks like the same door in the upper drawing. It's all changed and closed, and the door is the same.
Yes, sir. Tyler with Source Contracting representing Revitalize ILM. The door, Kyle misspoke. I'm sorry about that. The door is actually you're talking about the first floor door?
The one that is shown right here on the lower level. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that door we're not doing anything with that door. It's a wooden door. We're probably gonna have to take the door off. There's a lot of wood rot around the door jambs. So there'll be a bunch of carpentry work, et cetera. But that door's staying.
That's not an original door.
No, sir. No, sir.
No, it certainly doesn't seem congruent with the house either.
I'm not sure if that's a bypass item for a door or if it's not. We had no plans on changing it. If you guys would like us to change it, we'd appreciate with, maybe an approval with a condition to change the door maybe. But all we're proposing is for the second floor balcony to be enclosed.
I think if you guys can use a window by Dallas Millwork, they make one with Akoya wood. Pella makes a wood window. Marvin makes a wood
Yep.
window. And they're all quality windows.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we've used Pella wood windows before. Yeah.
Anderson may make one too. I'm not sure. I mean, I see.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if they make one that's the actually solid wood frame sash.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now the public hearing part, is there anyone who wants to speak? Okay, open up deliberations. Any comments? Motion?
Again, if it's a wood window, I don't see a reason not to approve it personally.
You want to give a motion?
I move to approve with condition the request to enclose the second story porch and the rear elevation of the house at 505 Ann Street. Details as shown on the drawings, plans, photographs, submittals, and narrative statements contained in the application and supplemental materials and statements made at the meeting are a part of the request unless otherwise noted. The motion is based upon the evidence presented before us, the application submittals, testimony, staff reports, including the findings of facts. The following conditions shall be applied to ensure compliance with the design standards, so set forth in staff report 1 to 5, and the windows shall be wood, not, no, it's in there.
Oh, sorry. There's only 4 conditions, and the first one is that the window shall be
Okay,
wood.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The proposed request with conditions does comply with the Wilmington design standards for historic districts and landmarks, is compatible with the materials, features, design, context, and character of the historic building and the historic district in which it is located, and is congruous with the site's streetscape and historic aspects of the historic district residential as a whole, applicable design standards, 1.6 Secretary of the Interior standards, standards 2 and 9, 3.2 windows and doors, standard 5, 3.6 porches and entrances, standard 1, 5, and 7.
Anyone want a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. I have one question to bring up while, if we do this extra kind of process for this function, the workshop we were supposed to have a year or 2 years ago about congruity. Can we address that at some point and start doing that where remember we were dealing with within a district with, we can go define better what congruity means by block, or what can define it further, not just that if it's in the district, but it's in your block. Remember we were talking about that? It was way before COVID. If we can somehow either do a subcommittee while we're maybe considering this whole process for this particular kind of thing to address and define further congruity, I think that would help to keep things historic with the, more relevance in its location rather than just the district. And that was something we remember, it was from fall 2 years ago.
And I just wanted to make a quick point that the SHPO's office has released one of its training series, which I was about to share with you all. I was just trying to get a little clarity from the SHPO's office. I haven't heard back from them, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to look at that series and see if there's anything related to that aspect that might also be of assistance to the commission. So I just wanted to offer that.
Yeah, because this came up when there was the issue of the hotel on 2nd Street and the lawsuit or a prior case that had said if it's in the district and you can't deny it just because it doesn't necessarily fit on the block. And the whole issue was that congruity was dictionary definition. So there was nothing in the guidelines to define more of what the kind of congruity that we want maybe to be applicable in a particular block. And that doesn't necessarily mean everything, but the kinds of things that keep in accordance with the block you're on. And that we could do that by adding on to the guidelines how we're dealing with the word congruity.
We could just keep in mind that change would have to go to city council for approval.
Right,
So-
which I know that's not something we can do overnight, but it's something, if we were going to change something in the guidelines, I think that would be really helpful in keeping the historic integrity of a particular block, that just because it's not 5 blocks away and it looks good on that block, it might not look good on this block. That was just that was an issue back when it was the hotel on 2nd Street.
I'd like to make a quick presentation before we close the meeting out. We all know that the Land Development Code for 2021 is currently being finalized. It's been presented to council. There was a public hearing and there'll be another one in July. My concern is that the stay of demolition is going to be done away with outside of the HD. Which means that significant structures will be at risk. I spoke as a citizen in the public forum and asked for a second look at this. I actually reached out to SHPO and asked specifically about, was there any language that may be used to protect our structures until there's some legislative action could be taken, which is at best probably a 1.5 to 2 year process. That once, if this is language, it remains in the new document, that our structures will be unprotected. And they sent back a long paragraph and suggested that this protection, and I won't read it now, but I reached out further and proposed a written to Christine and to Glenn Harbeck, and this was his reply to me, which the commission can and should do if it's the will of the commission to look favorably upon worthy structures and buildings outside of the HD. It would be for the commission to pass a resolution in support of legislative action at the state level. You, meaning Michael, could bring a draft resolution forward to the full commission for their endorsement. And that would get the ball rolling for the city's legislative liaison to start the work to get this. I was only hoping that there might be some language in the new land development code that would buy us some time until such legislative action took place. There are 4 other municipalities in the state who have done this to protect their buildings. And I would like to have some discussion next month about that.
Have they succeeded in doing it, or are they
Yes.
in the process?
Yes, well, the other cities,
Uh-huh.
yes, there are 4 cities that took the initiative to get legislative action specific to their town or municipality to protect and their dwelling. So that's what I would like to see us do. And we can talk about it next month, but I feel very strongly about this, and that we should have, we should be good stewards of our potential properties outside of the protected zone and look favorable on them. Just buying them time to work with, again, property owners to see what can be done, move the structure, adapt it, do something different. And that's all the stay of demolition does. So, thank you.
I mean, I'm concerned because I've heard of a house in our neighborhood that they're sitting on and waiting for it to be condemned so that they can tear it down for the parking lot. And that's concerning to me. It's a beautiful building, beautiful.
Yeah.
home.
Well,
And what can you do? You really can't do anything.
Well, right, if this goes forward and Melissa had said, there's no legal standing. But
I mean, we
if
just
this
watch
goes
it- we
away,
just watch it
there'll be
rot
no
in our neighborhood.
protection. But legislative action specific to Wilmington and specific to 90-day stay buys a period of time to work with the property owner and staff and the commission to
So we
work
can
out a
do
good
something
solution
proactively to, say.
to get the ball rolling.
We don't want this demolished,
Well, I mean, I think and again, I don't know how it would be worded, but again, the language, when our representative would put a bill or specific to Wilmington addressing stay of demolitions for significant structures.
And Michael, you said you were going to draft a resolution
No,
that
he
the commission
just-
would vote
because
on?
I asked the question.
Mhm.
He just said, me, Michael, because I've been concerned about this. I wrote a letter a year ago hearing that this was going to be going away, and that for a town who prides itself in its architecture and its history, that we lose this protection. It's very distressing. I would be happy to do that and work with staff for how you construct the language to do that, but it would really be just to get the ball rolling, to get it started. But again, that's a slow process. But the SHPO did recommend a paragraph that would work to protect our buildings before the legislative action is adopted. But if we can talk about it more next month, I can reach out and get some guidance about how you draft such a resolution. But the clock's ticking. If this protection falls away, so will the protection of our buildings. And I hate to think that 2 years they'll be at risk against developers or anyone that wants to bulldoze a significant building or something.
That reminds me of another question I bring up once in a while. Back when Dawn was here, I brought up the whole issue of other sections of the commercial district and other parts of town that to be funding at some point in the city budget to do a study of the historic matrix of those areas to see if any should be considered HR or whatever. Has anything ever been done in that direction with the city or the budget or anything?
I'm not sure if Dawn submitted anything in terms of budget request for an additional study on other areas outside of the local district. But that's certainly something that, as part of the goals or opportunities for the commission, we could certainly propose a study be done. We would just need to come up with a budget and have it submitted by the start of the year so that city council can review that.
Because, I mean, I think it's insane that we end at Chestnut Street and just Cotton Exchange, Railroad Museum, it's up for grabs over there. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be something that would need to be submitted through the budget process and city council would need to approve it.
And so is there some formal way we can request this? I mean, do we need to pass
Yes.
a note or how does that?
The powers of the commission, and I'll give you a copy
Well,
of this. The second one is that you recommend, the commission recommends
Okay.
the study. I actually got with Dawn my first year and asked about how does the commission set goals? And she said, absolutely. I never knew that we as a commission had the power to request a survey or to request a portion. And to look at boundaries, it's pretty large. It couldn't all be done at once, but
Yeah, I would suggest.
we can start that ball rolling.
Yeah, I would suggest that you start thinking about it early because those areas would need to be defined and then staff would need time to look at the boundary justifications and reach out to get budget estimates for such an undertaking so that that data can be compiled and presented as part of the budget process. So you just need to, that's something that just needs to be thought about well in advance. It's not necessarily something we can pull together at the last minute. So just sort of think about areas that are maybe of most importance that, is first on the list. And
Actually, I have a list that I gave staff a heart attack about a year ago when I read it in the meeting. But anyway, I'll find it on my computer.
Sounds like you're the head of that subcommittee.
Okay, I guess so. But one more thing, I'll draw your attention back to 411 South Front Street, item I and item J in that packet. If you would look at that. That's the pergola, the gazebo in the back, and there's a picture there. It's I and J. I would request that maybe Cynthia Rouse takes a look at the two homes that are quite obvious in the picture over the fence as DBN. I mean, something is going on over there. Those two homes, the backs at least, because when I went through this and I saw those, I was like, oh my God, look at these houses. And these people over there with this pool have to look at those. But I mean, they look like they have issues. I don't know what the addresses are, obviously, but.
Yeah, the Keenan house is under renovation now.
Oh, are they under renovation?
And there are two dead trees behind them. They go down and take.
Okay, but somebody's doing something about this then, because from the picture I couldn't tell. Okay, that's fine, because I was kind of like, when I saw that in the picture, I was like, oh my God. Okay, all right, well.
So a motion to adjourn the meeting?
No, adjourn the meeting. I make a motion.
I second it.
I make a motion. Anybody opposed?
Aye.